They label him a villain, like that's the whole story. A ruthless guildmaster who bared his true power before everything in his path got crushed, who banishes anyone he can't stand. But Act H isn't kicking anyone out. He's slamming them right where they belong exactly. Their talents explode with brilliance, just like he did back then. And just like that, everything clicks and turns into a full-blown success story. Every victim gets taken. He grins at him, and then his brand new guild rides out. It surges right up until it hits S ring. Drank, then he pulled together the Misfits. It hammers them into something legendary, and launches them into the wild to conquer the world. What happens when the villain finally steps into the spotlight and everything changes? Turns into the world's greatest mentor. Alright, let's find out what happens next. Ilix, the guildmaster of the Home Heroes Adventurers, leans in and tells Act H, "From today on, don't come back, you were useless." He couldn't believe it. This guild wanted nothing from him at all, and that realization hit like a punch what the heck was going on. So what was he saying? He just dropped a massive contribution to the guild. He couldn't just suddenly throw him out. Ilix went rigid, bracing for impact. Snapped out of his chair and barked, "Don't you get it? They can't. They can't waste money on dead weight, so tell him to grab his things and get out of here." Suddenly, security yanked the MC by both arms, trying to haul him out of the office while he fought to break free. Act shot back at the guildmaster, demanding he hold his ground and give them time to hash out everything. I begged for answers, but it was all for nothing. Boom, he got tossed straight out the guild doors, rage turning into tears as he cried in despair. Then he panicked. "What do I do now?" And the guards just shrugged like it wasn't their problem. Years later, he was finally on his own, stranded in the kingdom of Gaetaniga. In Foretsu City, where the adventures begin, in the middle of grooming those precious talents, a sudden knock slammed on the door. On the door of the protagonist's office, Keiji, Sum. He was summoned to meet him because that act had come to see him, but the cruel words of the people who exiled him kept echoing, and they didn't erase the truth. His memory flashed back when they threw him out of the guild unfairly, and he vowed he'd never let it happen again. When KG showed up to the office, MC snapped that the guy didn't even need to come, calling him straight up useless, just pure cruelty. The blacksmith just stared at the protagonist, completely baffled, like he couldn't believe he was any help to this guild at all. Acta blurted, "He's been in this guild for years," so suddenly, and he barked, "I won't say it twice, let the kid go." The boy. He stared in disbelief, tried to fire back, but the protagonist's cold demeanor shut him down instantly, like he'd hit the ceiling on how much he could push. So there was no point keeping someone around anymore if they weren't needed, and talent alone couldn't change that. KG choked back a sad sigh, thinking, "What do I do now? I've got no parents left." If he got expelled, he'd be thrown straight onto the street, no safety net, no second chance. So the protagonist told him the Blacksmith Guild, Hammer of the War God, had already carved out a spot for the KG, staring at the deputy director of the Royal Capital Headquarters, was completely thrown off. Frederica, the MC's personal maid, cornered him and asked, "So what are you even talking about?" "Tell the boy off. Make sure he listens while the master speaks, because the master just found him a better job." The protagonist's rage flared, and there's no way you're letting her speak for him. He whirled to the blacksmith and told him his friend was still hunting for someone. A person who could truly help him. He'd sharpened his blacksmithing skills until he finally hit that level, and now it was time to show off his talent in a whole new way. A brand new field. MC snapped his fingers, ordered Frederica to hand the guy every single document, and the girl told him right then, as he said it when she handed over KG. The necessary papers hit the guy like a brick. He didn't have a clue what was happening. Act leaned in and said, "You're getting married soon, right?" It would be. It'd be way more efficient to make steady money as a deputy than this KG would even cover his moving costs and all that. If he agreed, then let him walk once KG could think a bit again, he read. He devoured the documents, practically glowing as he thanked his master, because he never expected things to land like this after coming here. And when the protagonist stepped in, he warned him not to twist it around. This wasn't. For him, a blacksmith had zero place in the Adventurers Guild. If they let his talent rot, society would pay the price. Frederica truly believed he couldn't be honest for a single second. Honesty KG swallowed his pride, apologized to the protagonist, and admitted he still hadn't repaid him. Even though he had no use to anyone, he still took him in and never once made him feel small. Then he found his gift for blacksmithing and kept honing it until it became real. something he never saw coming at all, and when the truth hit, the protagonist snapped, telling him to stop spiraling and not dwell on it. Then stop staring at what he left behind, turn the page and focus on what comes next. How to get comfortable with his new job because there was no guild anymore for him to belong to, so he really had nothing to worry. KG stared at him and backed him up like, "Don't overthink it, just go." He gasped in surprise, then blurted out thanks for his help, and the blacksmith nodded, saying he'd never forget his kindness. He vowed to work his tail off to repay that help. MC said, 100-fold, and then smirked. All right, let him try. KG pulled him aside and swore this was true. Then they both hit their goodbyes. Once the blacksmith stormed out, Frederica leaned in and fired off a question to her master. Everything had gone perfectly. So, yeah, this guy was seriously useful, wasn't he? But then maybe he shouldn't have trusted him. Got kicked out. Ack just shrugged and said, "It's fine someday. He'll see. He's going to make it. Just look at his eyes. They're screaming it. One day, he'll rise and take the top spot of a major organization." No doubt he just figured this was the best way to turn his investment into profit fast. The maid snapped back, and it was crystal clear she got every single word right from the start. Then MC kept going. Young fish got tossed into the sea with one goal: fatten up, grow stronger, and get gathered later in way better shape. So KG gets his own rewards out of it too, meaning he won't even think about taking offense at being left out. Frederica snapped her hands together and said, "Just like a master would." He's absolutely crushing the role of the evil guildmaster, and she's totally awestruck, so why? But why was he thanking him? The protagonist just told him straight, KG now has to pay back that debt. He doesn't even understand why he's grateful, like, just for show, until the maid snaps, "I get it, he's really the villain." The protagonist shot back, sarcastically asking if that was really a compliment, and she answered, "Yeah," then added that he was an amazing guildmaster. She just knew it. Act had set the message in stone with her silence. Federica nodded and said, "All right then, duty first. Dinner starts at 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, the girl walked out, and the MC froze in his thoughts. Every cruel word from the people who pushed him out burned into his memory. And right then, he realized the truth. It was the end of the road. He got unfairly kicked out of the guild, but instead of breaking, he swore he'd never be that cruel again and never have to watch something like that happen to anyone ever again. Such people were back around him again, so now he had to stand on his own. He finally reaches his own master right there on the continent, where the real trouble is waiting. Beyond this world to the west, a whole patchwork of human and non-human races carves out their own countries, each one living by its own rules. And one of them is the mighty human kingdom of Gaidniga. A big-time government meeting is happening right there, and the stakes are huge. All anyone could talk about was how to take down the Demon Lord, because every single day he's getting more ruthless and more unstoppable. Joseph, the king of Gaidniga, snapped up and spoke out after a round of tough deliberation. They finally reached A. A full agreement settles it. Lawrence, the brave guy chosen to destroy the Demon Lord. He demanded from everyone in the room, any objections, and a subordinate started to squirm. The king's aide leaned in and asked, "Can you clear something up for me?" Lawrence had the brute power, the magic, and the grit to win, and you could bet he'd absolutely deliver. But then the real problem hit. He was far too strong to stop. Every single person stared at him in shock. Then the king snapped, "Is that true?" And the aide blurted back, "Yes, it's true the boy was..." Yeah, he was ridiculously strong, but strong enough that he had no one to back him up, because defeating the Demon Lord takes a real team. He was so skilled, he wiped out an entire horde of dragons all by himself. Princess Alice Stella snapped, "This is beyond the pale." She believed one person could take on opponents that would have crushed even a top-tier adventurer. With a whole party at her back, how could she ever land someone on that level? Humanity's been spared by the Overlord, yeah, the one everyone swears is stronger than all the rest, only because that holy enchantment has kept the wrath at bay. Ancient heroes left this behind, but it's all starting to crumble year by year, so the Overlord has to be crushed before the enchantments die off completely, period. Things turned downright dire right then. Prince Edward stepped forward and demanded the floor. The king leaned in and demanded, "Got anything to say?" And the prince opened his mouth, ready to speak. Joseph leaned in and blurted, "Why don't we trust the protagonist? What do you say?" Act Edward, clearly stunned, blurted out that he had. Spotted Lawrence's spark as an orphan, he took him in and raised him, convinced the brave protagonist would soon meet someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. The king weighed every word his son said. Alistella snapped, "Wait, who's that?" while her brother stared back, completely thrown. The assistant snapped back, "He's the worst guildmaster, period." Around 25 now, he founded the Adventurers Guild Precious Talents when he was still barely a kid, and he later followed through on that dream too. Still, when it shot him into the guild's second-ranked S-class spot, Alistella just stared in disbelief because honestly, even the worst of his achievements is unreal. In just a few years, that guild blew up into something untouchable. An assistant even swore he'd heard brutal rumors they kick out act exiles, sweeping the unwanted people out of the guild and sending them to other places. He also bragged that he can sway nobles and even other countries, and people whispered that the guilds who dared cross him got wiped out overnight. The princess stared in shock. Could someone like that really exist? The prince gave a quiet chuckle to himself, and it looked like he'd already clocked that. They flat out refused to let Axe step into the chosen one role they'd already picked out for someone else. Joseph let out a thoughtful chuckle, and he tossed the whole mess to his son, Edward, just as Bourne opened his mouth to object. Then the king shot him a look so sharp it felt like a warning, and he chose to stay silent. The prince raced up to his father and swore he'd reach the protagonist right away. Alistella leaned toward her father and blurted, "Can I?" She could join them, so the king snapped out, all fired up, and shouted, saying, in surprise, why? Because the girl started speaking like a bunch of piff, like a pea. A princess, so sure she could finally get to know him better, stepped forward with total confidence. She's also forced to make the big calls about their people's future. Fair and honest, no tricks, so the ruler promised. She can do whatever she wants, no questions asked. Edward clocked it instantly. She's still as cold and serious as ever. Alistella shot back that she trusts only her brother, no one else, and the prince nodded like he already knew that would be their story. She made it crystal clear she and him were heading out together. And with that, the king sealed the deal and wrapped up the meeting. The brethren finally spoke. Their sister burst out that they'll give everything they've got for the good of their country. Sometime later, Frederica burst into the protagonist's life. He wished him good morning and told him that his. With breakfast sizzling right on time, he shot her a grateful grin and thanked her, and slid into the chair at the table, locking eyes with. Spotting that tiny dessert, he leaned in and asked her what kind of cake it was. The maid snapped back that it looked like it had been baked fresh. She baked it herself, the head cook's daughter's way of showing appreciation, and MC said, So Lily, Frederica shot an apology her way and said, I told you guys not to go overboard with the sugar, but they totally ignored her. Then the protagonist waved it off like, Don't be silly, of course I'm going to eat it. Eat it! The maid gasped in shock. Would he dare to bite it anyway? How would that even work? How? Strange, Act shot back, because if they didn't act now, all that time and effort would have gone straight to waste. The girl stared him down, scrutinizing every detail. Then she finally noticed. You could tell the master had a heart of pure gold. She got hit with shock. Was she talking about him? Then she spelled it out, clear as day. MC leaned in with a grin, saying he's seriously charming, like unreal. That he could turn it around on her, too. Frederica looked sheepish. Act officially asked her what she meant, and when she spoke, he told her she was a beautiful, brilliant girl with a smile that felt warm and easy. She blushed harder and admitted, Ugh, the only guy I ever smile at is him. MC cracked a small smile and said, All right, at least that's how it is after breakfast. They trekked to the guild, and just as Frederica wanted, she pressed the protagonist about what he planned to do today. He told her that in the morning he'd have to run a document check, then head straight to a meeting with the mayor, and yep, the whole day was packed solid. The maid asked if he wanted to take a quick break, and Axe snapped that there was no sense delaying, he'd handle the work right now. Right away, turns out stepping into that guild was pointless from the start. Everyone in the room lit up and greeted him, and Frederica turned to the crowd like, Listen. The master was slammed with a tight schedule today, so they needed to lock in their meetings, and if nothing urgent came up, they had to report back to her, and the protagonist couldn't believe it. Everyone was in a surprisingly great mood. Right then, Yoko shoved forward and fought her way through the crowd, screaming that she had to meet with the absolutely right now urgent. With the guildmaster right there, she had to find a way in, so she slipped forward and made it happen. She hurled herself to the protagonist's feet, begging like her life depended on it. He blurted in shock, no way. They hadn't seen each other in ages, so he had to ask how she was doing. Tears spilled down her face as she fought to get the words out to him, but they just wouldn't come. Federica's mind snapped to one thought. Yoko, could the court mage have sent you? Because seriously, how did a nobody so close to the court wind up here? She warned Yoko they were running out of time to meet the master, and the protagonist snapped at the maid to cancel the meeting immediately. Meeting ended, and he promised he'd apologize in person later. So Frederica blinked in surprise and asked if he was really sure about that. Then he answered, and yes, Yoko used to be his subordinate, even if it was long ago. He grabbed her by the shoulders, hauled her in close, and ordered, "We're talking in my room." The visitors erupted in outrage. How in the world could that happen? What's this supposed to mean? Why her? In the office, he hauled Yoko into a chair and pressed something into her hands, like it was about to change everything. After he sipped the tea, he leaned in and asked if she'd finally cooled off. She insisted she was fine and begged him to forgive her. Federica told me Yoko got expelled last month, then straight up joined the court magicians. Yeah, right? The MC shot back, yeah, I started out as a healer, but magic came easy to me. The maid's eyes widened, stunned, because working in the palace didn't feel like her path at all. But the girl just smiled and said, nope, I'm actually perfectly happy right here. To her, it felt like a calling, then something ugly happened, and it all turned urgent. She got handpicked for the magical research department of the Court Magicians Corps. But Chief Hagen started watching her even more closely. Using his power, he leaned in and threatened to fire her if she didn't give in. He kept reaching for her again and again, touching her over and over while she kept talking to her. She went to her colleagues for answers, but they snapped at her to shut it down. She put up with it because the protagonist had vouched for the place. She didn't want to burden him with her pain, but she'd hit the breaking point and couldn't hold it in anymore. Not anymore. Let her come back to him right now. Him. Then the protagonist's heart sank and he brooded in silence. Now it all clicked in his head, he remembered. He remembered that one morning when Yoko smiled and wished him good morning, then handed him the exact materials he'd asked for. She thanked her, and when she leaned in to get a good look, she realized she didn't just look tired, she looked truly unwell. He asked her right away if she felt sick, and she answered him while he checked her temperature. Everything looked fine until the number hit 39 degrees Celsius. He nearly snapped, begging her to go home, but he held it back because Yoko always had a fierce sense of responsibility. So he pitched her a job as a courtier right there, and she stared in shock, then burst into delighted disbelief. She thanked him, then admitted it felt exactly like a dream come true, and she would. She'd burn every bridge to help, and now MC is staring straight at it. She stared at the miserable Yoko and snapped, "Lift your head up." He pushed back from the table, apologized to her, and the protagonist snapped that he knew he should have done it sooner. He finally got it. This mess was on him, not some mystery, and the girl just stared, shocked, and argued, "What are you even talking about?" Because deep down, everyone knew it was all Hagen's fault. Act swallowed his pride, apologized to the girl again, and flat out said he couldn't grant her request. Then her face froze, like everything just shattered. She stared at him through the hurt and admitted she had nowhere left to run. Then he pressed her for the exact location of the court mage. That was her childhood dream, right? The girl blurted it out in pure shock. He remembers the protagonist snapping back to her like he already knew she was remembering every dream and goal people once told him, like a guildmaster sworn to remember, he never ever let them slip. Don't worry, he'll handle it. So don't just throw away your dream job like it's nothing, got it? The girl stared at him. Baffled, MC told Frederica to arrange a meeting at the palace, and the maid quickly asked if she should send them a message. The protagonist flat out refused and promised he'd just show them exactly what happens next. What would happen if they dared to touch his polished gemstone with their own hands? Their filthy hands grabbed the moment, then he yanked out a simple magical. A magical transmitter slipped out of his jacket pocket. That faceless voice pressed him, "What's wrong?" And MC quickly apologized for interrupting. He leaned in and asked if he could spare him a little time today, and the other guy said, yes, without hesitation. Positively. Later on, the protagonist tagged along with. Yoko burst into the Rasik Palace and headed straight for the Court Magicians Department. He strode up to Hagen, the head of magical research, and told him it was an absolute thrill to finally meet him then, right after. Ack told him his name and tossed out an apology for wasting his time, and Hagen shuckled like a proud rooster, and then he snapped, "Yeah, commoners keep chewing up my precious time." The protagonist shot back, "Don't worry, it won't take long." He'd already heard that. Hagen was up to something shady with one of his former subordinates. The head shot back, brazen as ever. "I don't remember anything like that." while Yoko fumed with pure indignation. How dare he lie so shamelessly? The man shrugged, saying, "She can spin any tale she wants, but with zero proof, it's just rumors, right?" The young guildmaster took it all in, didn't he? The protagonist answered, "Yes." Hagen pressed on if he finally got it all, then it was time to step out, while Yoko stayed right here. He has to get her alone, no one else around. Told the furious girl, "Don't stress, you're going to be okay." The master would handle it all, every last thing. At that exact moment, MC blurted out, like the proof was burning in his chest, proof in. "So yeah, go for it." He activates it. He snapped his all-seeing gaze into focus and blasted A. A picture shows Yoko rolling up to Hagen and flat out telling him she needed to talk to him. They stared at the picture like it was a ghost. Is that really her? She stared at the photo. There was the department head, answering her face-to-face. "Yep," he said, "about that research materials delay from the other day." She was about to explain herself, but he cut her off, said he gets it, then dropped the bomb. The management had just changed the schedule. It wasn't her fault. People just love blaming someone, even when all they see is work. He had to lay into her hard, no matter that it was just a formality because they were alone, and she shouldn't dare resist. Yoko shoved him back and snapped, "Enough!" And Hagen stared, frozen. The moment he saw the picture, he stared straight at the protagonist and demanded, "So this is your power, your magic eye?" That guy. The protagonist shot back, "Yeah, it's true. My right eye can peer into the hidden past." The leader just stared, lost in thought. A magic eye, of course, if they tried to use it as evidence, it'd instantly blow holes in his whole argument. Act sprang to his feet and told Frederica they had to move right now. Go. He can bark it out like a bully, then hit him with a cold stop. He refused to share a single thing with anyone, only after he activated his. His wind magic ripped through the air, and he shouted right after. If he died, the whole problem would be gone for good. Frederica thrust a magical weapon into the protagonist's hands, and with one brutal swing, he severed the enemy's magic right off the spot. Hagen's eyes widened because how on earth was that even possible? MC snapped his head toward the maid and the girl beside her. A girl snapped her fingers and activated her skill. Har lunged at the leader, screaming with pure rage as he pounced. Did he really just try to kill the master? She'd rip him apart the second she got the chance. Act snapped at her to stop wasting her time and energy on him, and Hagen blurted in total confusion, "This can't be." No spells at all, just tiny motions, and he couldn't even steal a breath of air while tracking him with his eyes. The MC answered. His eyes lock onto everything, one eye burning with the hidden past, the other staring straight into the future, even the secret potential still waiting to be unlocked. The department head, twisted at the maid's mercy, snapped in shock. "Past and future, you can't." "No way. Those are the King of Time's eyes, burning with sight of the past and the future, and yeah, it's totally insane. A gift this rare hasn't shown up in centuries, so how in the world is a commoner's kid supposed to have it?" Then the world shifted when Axe stared him down and swore he wasn't a monster and offered a deal. If he could apologize to Yoko the right way and swear it would never happen again, he'd just act like the proof didn't even exist. He can't believe it. "Wait, are you telling me that's true?" MC blurted, "Why not?" The department head gave a curt nod, and then the scene cut off mid-motion. He blurted it out. Of course he should apologize, and Hagen dragged himself across the floor right to Yoko's feet. He sprinted back to her and begged for forgiveness, admitting that what he did was unworthy of him and that he was genuinely, painfully sorry. The protagonist demanded, "Did you really do it?" And the man shot back instantly, "Yeah, I did." He spilled everything, then swore it was the last time, promising he'd never repeat it. He hands over his word of honor, and Yoko's left completely stunned, so surprised. Then he asks, "Is that enough?" And the girl just can't find her voice. The girls answered with nervous nods, and the protagonist leaned in fast, telling her not to worry, because it wasn't over. He turned right then, like something was about to snap. He spun toward Edward and blurted, "Tell me I'm right, huh?" Everyone's jaws dropped at the prince's stunning appearance. Frederica bowed politely. Yoko's eyes went huge with shock, and Hagen blurted in terror, "What?" But wait. His Highness, Prince Edward. What is he doing here? Edward barrels past the chaos, steps up to the protagonist, bows with perfect manners, and says, "It's been a long time since we last saw each other." Hagen couldn't even blink. His Royal Highness was bowing to a commoner right in front of him. The MC shot the prince a few polite words, then leaned in and demanded to know whether he'd heard everything that went down. Edward snapped, "Yes, of course," then glared straight at Hagen and sneered, "Shame on you, a nobleman serving in the palace." Like every word dripped contempt. The leader scrambled to defend himself, insisting everything was wrong and that he'd misunderstood, only for the prince to snap him off, growling, "So what? We've got proof." Then he pressed harder. "You even confessed now. You'd better brace yourself for punishment, Hagen." Reagan's voice cracked, nearly in tears. "Please, don't let him say that he was only trying to touch a commoner, Edward Blazingwood." With rage choking his voice, he spat out the truth. "Nobles and commoners are equal. Every single one of them is a citizen of the same country. They're inseparable, like they were fused into one fate." The leader clutched at a final, trembling shot at sense. Please let him reconsider. A few days later, Yoko showed up to the protagonist and confessed they hadn't seen each other in ages, then asked him to forgive her for stealing his time. He waved it off, promised he was fine, and pressed, "Did everything go well?" The girl answered, "Yeah, he'd been yanked out by the higher-ups, stripped of his title, and hit with a pile of fresh charges, including straight-up assault. The new leader turned out to be a total sweetheart. She's actually loving her job now, and the MC couldn't help but say, well..." He was overjoyed for her, and Yoko practically beamed as she thanked him with all her heart for his help. Then she added, by the way, that she'd always known he was a good leader. Then boom, it turns out he can fight too, and that's blowing everyone's mind. She's absolutely buzzing with curiosity now. She'd heard whispers about the King of Time right from his court's magical research department, where she worked too, and where those eyes became the stuff of legends. She couldn't get enough of studying them. Frederica snapped, "Watch your words." And the girl's voice trembled as she insisted she was just joking, while the maid cut in. And she didn't even smile, so the protagonist calmly answered Yoko, "It's not that useful, because there are all kinds of limitations. The farther the event slips into the distance, the Time King's vision gets fuzzier and fuzzier, like the future is unraveling right before his eyes. Sometimes the future twists away from what he saw, but this power guzzles magic nonstop, so he can't use it recklessly or too often." Frederica swore it was real. This master truly had eyes and razor-sharp intelligence, the kind that lets him see the future before it happens. But he isn't some all-powerful god, so she better stop fooling herself with false hopes. Yoko blurted, "Yeah, I get it, everything," and promised that if trouble ever hit, she'd jump in and help without hesitation. Frederica shot back, acting like she was being perfectly blunt like a wife would, then said they'd be happy to work with her. But the protagonist snapped with fury. What kind of stiff, formal nonsense was that? Yoko once again beamed, thanked her benefactor to the heart, and promised that starting now, she'd do everything she could to help them. After she vanished, the maid leaned in and praised MC like crazy. "Excellent work, master." He didn't just crack the problem, he forged a game-changing line of communication with the most promising candidate to become the next head of the court mages. Act leaned in and asked if she was really that shocked, because that move was so obvious, it practically screamed at everyone. She blurted, totally confused. Then she snapped, "Wait, why are they all thanking him?" He just stays there, silent as stone, staring out into the distance. He stared out the window, and the maid reached a conclusion. He's the worst guildmaster, no question about it, and it shows every single day. After Yoko's mess got settled, the protagonist finally caught up with the prince, and he wasted no time thanking him for caring enough to step in. Edward brushed off his gratitude and told him, "Don't thank me." Because they were the ones who let that injustice slip through, he snapped, and then said he had one favor to ask. He looked at him and asked, wanting to hand him the keys, because he'd love to trust him to pick the members for the next party of heroes. The protagonist leaned in and asked, "Do you want me to go track down some companions for Lawrence?" So they picked him as the hero, and right then, Edward said, "Yeah, there's no point dodging his stare." MC straight up said it wasn't him, and even then, power can only be used so much in everyday life. Fools keep abusing their eyes, like they're invincible, so you better use them with care. Finding companions worthy of a man like that is brutal, so you'd better tread carefully. The prince nodded along. Yeah, it was true, and that's exactly why he dared to hope he could finally rely on his connections. Yeah, they're involved, and I asked in a rush, "Will the higher-ups just stay silent?" With a quiet voice, Edward admitted it was true those ministers barely understood him at all, just the thinnest slice of who he really was. MC smirked and thought, they don't get to steer this ship unless I'm holding the strings. He's a man of his own, not bowing to any minister, because if Lawrence takes the lead and wins, those ministers won't get their pockets stuffed. He looked me dead in the face and snapped, "This is total nonsense, wake up. He's got real ambitions to chase, not some pointless power game run by old men." Edward told him, "I get why you're upset, but only I can pull off this job the right way, with no room for shortcuts. If he isn't tied to any faction, then let him step in and help their country." After that tense little silence, our protagonist. The dragoness begged him to forgive, but he clenched his jaw and refused anyway. The prince blinked in shock and demanded, "Why?" Act shot back, "Because he doesn't care at all about the country's future, the doors." The door flew open, and Alistella stormed in, fuming. "How dare he say that? And why is he ignoring the king's order?" Edward whipped his head toward her, shocked she'd been named. MC shot back, calm as ice, saying it wasn't his problem what happened to the kingdom. Lawrence could deal with that, especially since he was no longer under his command. Not everyone's going to back the heroes, and the royal house is already stepping in to help them. Or were they so pathetic that they had no choice but to lean on commoners? Rage boiled in the princess as she snapped toward her brother, urging him to get out. Then Edward tried to wrench his hand free, but the protagonist yanked it right back and demanded she stop. "Hold up," she snapped at him, storming with anger, demanding what else, and he just told her it was already late, so they'd better pack up and leave tomorrow. Alistella snapped in surprise. She never thought he'd show a shred of care, but she didn't owe him her ears anyway. The protagonist just shrugged like, "We're allowed to do what we want," and Alistella declared, "That's exactly what I'm doing." Then she yanked her brother along with her. Edward hurried over, apologized, and promised, "We'll meet again." Again, after they took off, Frederica muttered that she'd been wildly rude. MC leaned in and asked if she'd heard everything, and the maid nodded, "Yep, I got it all." Had her, and she fought tooth and nail to keep herself from finally teaching that little rude woman a lesson. He told her, "Don't waste another second on this." And just like that, she tried to push back. But Act shot back with steel in his voice, promising he wouldn't say it again. His thoughtful expression flashed, and you could tell something was about to click. She snapped to attention, then shouted to her master without hesitation. He spun toward her and told Frederica he needed her for some business, and she shot back, "So you saw something." The protagonist thought, sometimes the eye just slips into the future on its own, unintentionally, no warning at all. But here's the catch, it zeroes in on the moments that matter most. After a while, he leaned in and told the maid, "I need to head out." She told him, right as he placed the order, so why didn't she have to step in and help those people? The protagonist snapped, "Don't twist this, I swear, this is still only a single step away from finally pulling off his plans." And right then, when the king's kids finally rode back home in a carriage from MC, Alistella leaned in and told her brother all about the protagonist because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. He's not just bad, he's downright terrible. Edward told her to drop the anger, and honestly, he was right. Beating the demon lord is basically the royal family's job. Beauty shot daggers with her indignant stare, and he stepped in to back her up against this total bore. Or her brother snapped back, "I'm not being rude, I just don't know how to show feelings." And it sounded like the truth, because he was the nicest person she could remember, and when the princess blurted out, she basically admitted he hadn't seen enough good people. Edward swallowed hard and thought, this is a tragedy, things can't keep going like this. Mr. Act and his sister aren't just important, they're the key to their country's future. He said there's a huge gap between acting nice and truly being kind, and once someone lands a royal appointment, ministers love to pile on with needless persecution. Alistella snapped back, but she still refused to let him trade his future for the fate of the whole country. The prince has got a point, doesn't he? So what are they going to do? How do they make it up to him for the headache he's about to face? Is the head of the organization, and he's got one brutal job, protect himself and his people no matter what. And now he's about to choose the heroes who will carry the group forward. And if he slips up, it won't just doom the kingdom, it'll crush his guild too. So did she get why he refused? The girl blurted out, cheeks burning, and she nodded to her brother, then the prince barreled onward. Continued, no joke, he's actually a good guy. The princess challenged him, and he somehow made it look like every rumor about him was spot on. Her brother leaned in and promised her she'd see it with her own eyes. Before long, he was beaming with joy, and he couldn't stop himself. He wanted to tack on one more thing. Then just like that, the carriage slammed to a sudden, grinding halt. Alice Della went flying off the bench as Edward slammed into his head. He stumbled out of the carriage, cursed under his breath, and couldn't stop wondering what had just gone wrong. Your sister cornered him and demanded, "What's wrong with you?" Right then, the prince felt a cold blade press against his neck, close enough to steal the breath from his lungs. Phoenix blurted, Princess," as the girl stood there. He gasped in shock at the robbers, instantly recognizing who they were. This wasn't a random hit, it was set up. Then Edward snapped at her, furious. She sprinted for her life, trying to outrun the memories of him. To save herself, then Finn lunged at him and struck. He snapped his attack so hard that the prince crumpled, slumping to the ground. He jerked upward to get moving, but the bandits. It crushed his hand underfoot and warned him, "Don't you dare move." Edward snapped, "Who sent you?" And the guy just smiled, like he knew something Edward didn't. He said he wants to know, so he'll spill it to a big shot who's seriously pissed at him. The prince stared in shock. Could this blow-up really be because of that group gathering? He bellowed at the bandit, "Back off, leave his sister alone." "She's got nothing to do with this," Finn snapped, furious. And honestly, he doesn't care about the main thing. The real fight is getting the money, when the princess stared at Nick and snapped, begging Finn to let her brother go. The bandit leaned into the carriage window and stared inside, then said, "What a fierce, fighting princess, so beautiful. I could just end her myself." Edward charged straight for the bandit, screaming that he'd better not even think about touching her. He lunged in just the right moment, struck him clean, and then roared to his sister. His sister yelled that they had to sprint right now. They leaped out of the carriage and caught sight of a bunch of people right away. The crowd closes in around them, and the bandits bark, "Found you, here they are." They pressed Finn for answers, right there, as the bandit rubbed. He rubbed his sore bruise and snapped that the prince was just a little brat. Edward yanked his sword free, and just as he was about to swing for the prince tried to fight back, but the bandit's own comrades hit first, cracking him right in the face, and the prince went down. Alistella dropped to her knees before her brother and desperately tried to bring him back. Finn warned her it was a fast-acting poison, and death was coming any moment. She gasped in horror, "No, this can't be." Finn kept going seriously. They'd planned to hit the next act too, but the two of them slipped out in the dead of night and didn't finish. Right into their hands, Alistella, terrified that her brother might die, blamed herself like it was all her fault for not listening to the protagonist's advice. None of this would have ever happened. She started to blurt out apologies to. Edward lay totally still then, at that exact moment. Nick stormed up to her, snatched her hands in his, and declared, "All right, now it's time to play with her." The moment his hands moved, the girl buckled with panic and screamed at him to stay away. The bandit caught sight of her gorgeous face and couldn't help but stare. He just snapped. He slammed her to the ground and pinned her there, and the princess started thrashing and screaming for help. The bandit leaned in and told her help was never coming out here in the pitch-black middle of the night, deep in the forest. No one would hear her. He let out a loud breath, and then, wow, now her voice sounded even more beautiful, and her scream was even better. Now he demanded to know how she could scream again, and the girl shut her eyes, helpless as she could be. She didn't want to look him in the face then, right in that moment, the protagonist. The villain's voice echoed through the air, and right in that moment, you demanded to know why the bandits were here. Nick snapped back in shock. Who were they? And why did they feel like something he'd never seen before? Ack abruptly yanked his grip off the girl and snapped his attention to the protagonist, Ack said. So yeah, he's basically telling them, "Fine, I'm giving you a chance to run." Phoenix smirked smugly. Oh, the forest feels harmless when you wander solo, and that'll save everyone the hunt later. MC stared at Alistella and snapped that she was stupid for brushing off his advice. Now, she's about to meet the consequences head on. Nick shouted at him to stop brushing him off, then sprinted straight at the protagonist. The princess yanked her voice loud and screamed at the protagonist to run right now. Nick swung at him hard, but the hit slipped just wide. Stella froze in shock. There was no way he could be pretending. Act snapped out of the way barely. MC spun around for sure. Nick stood there, and she just kept working right behind him, hands moving fast. He swung in and delivered a fatal blow. He stared at him in shock, utterly stunned. He looked so stunned, like his brain couldn't even process it. Wait, how did he pull that off? The protagonist strode up to the girl and shoved his cloak into her hands so she could cover herself. She took it with a grateful breath, spun toward her brother and shouted, while MC urged her to calm down now. He slammed the poison to a stop like it never even stood a chance. She stared at him, totally lost. Wait, what did you do? He broke it down. He could manipulate specific moments in time. Alistella's brain just couldn't wrap around it. Axe. He revealed the power to slam time to a halt or speed it up inside his own body, and with it, he stopped the poison from spreading. Poison coursed through the prince's body. Now all he had left to do was rip it out, and then he'd finally be safe. Saved, she snapped her gaze to her brother. She found him again, and she thanked God. The protagonist snapped around to face the bandit. So I'm basically asking, are they finally done with this conversation or what? Then me. And maybe they'll shut up as he twists their arms like it's nothing. Phoenix smirks and throws down the question, what's he actually hinting at? Sure, he's strong, but beating them all. That's a different beast. The protagonist just chuckled, really. Then how about this? Then a fireball snapped into existence in his hands, and it shifted into a full-blown monster and tore through the bandits. Finn stared in shock and blurted, what kind of monster are you? Act said that because of him, he managed to. Finally wiped out the trash, scurrying through the capital. When he got the chance, he even stuffed food into the cute little beast's mouth, and that's when the bandit. Rage flared in him. How dare this guy say that? He snapped, what's wrong with you? The MC just hit back. He doesn't owe them any explanations. Finn snapped to the last remaining bandits, demanding they swarm the protagonist and end him for good. Bandits lunged at him, but he acted fast and cut them off. Tore forward with jaw-dropping speed and raw, crushing power. He tore them apart, one by one. He started thinking about time manipulation, like what if he could bend it? So you lock the power of your eye on yourself and push the acceleration to the max. You can rocket past speed limits no human could ever touch. Finn snapped a curse under his breath, stunned, like, what on earth? What kind of trick is that? How is he pulling this off? And, right. Explosions erupted right beside the bandits. As the candidates closed in, Phoenix snapped and shouted, monster! Monster. And just a short time later, the opponents got absolutely demolished. Alice. Stella's eyes went wide. She couldn't believe what she was seeing right then. A carriage rolled up nearby, and the protagonist snapped, don't worry, to the girl, like everything would be fine. He stood firmly on her side as the carriage barreled toward them, and then the princess snapped to attention, shocked to see it wasn't an escort at all, but a full detachment of court healers. So Act figured out her brother was going to get poisoned, and then whoa, what? Who the hell was that guy? The healers spilled out of the carriage and sprinted straight for the prince to treat him before it was too late. Alistella was so moved, it felt like her heart had been grabbed. The protagonist's own gesture cinched everything, like the whole moment was watching him back. Shame crushed her because she doubted him. He hauled her to her feet and shoved her into the carriage seat. After a while, Bourne listened to his assistant's report, snapped in rage, and demanded, what are you even saying? The assassination attempt on the king's offspring failed. So what happened with that Black Wolves Assassins Guild? Did they really get wiped out? Nah, he'd personally go over every single detail himself. The minister watched his assistant disappear from sight as he fired off a simple magical transmitter. But no matter what he tried, he couldn't reach his contact until Frederica burst into his office at that very moment. The office went silent as a severed hand dangled from her grip, hiding the transmitter that broadcasted that call. Stunned, the minister stared and thought, this has got to be the hand of the Grey Wolves Guildmaster right there showing the insignia. With a shaky voice, he blurted, hey, who are you? Frederica flashed a graceful curtsy, then leaned in with heartfelt wishes and daring hope. Minister Bourne, good morning, she said it while smiling, and then revealed that Mr. Act had sent her. Staring him straight in the eyes, she declared, I'm your Reaper. Reaper right then. The minister's device exploded with a ring. The maid shoved him toward the phone and swore it was her master calling, ordering Bourne to pick up so the minister answered, and the protagonist immediately told him to check. Checkmate, turns out the Assassins Guild was wiped off the board. The minister shot up in outrage. This is total nonsense. There's no way those Grey Wolves could have been beaten that easily. Act demanded proof that the girl he sent delivered, and Bourne flicked his gaze to his own hand and blurted it out, money, plain and simple. He'd cough up whatever Act wanted. He demanded an answer because they had to reach an agreement right now. And deep down, he knew it. He wasn't any less of a villain than the rest of them. He needed to make his own money, and on top of that, he was ready to team up with him. Out of nowhere, the minister's eyes widened. Snow was falling all around him. He blurted out, shocked out of nowhere, what is this? Frederica, the one who'd ominously called for the fallout, let him. Don't you dare compare the master to that worthless creature. With a flick of her hands, the girl blasted the minister in a raging cage of ice. After that, she leaned in and told the protagonist what happened. She was done, and she couldn't help but add, with pure admiration, "That's amazing." He used the chaos from that attack to wipe out the minor villains, and his reply came sharp, brilliant, absolutely excellent. Now, get her back here immediately. After a while, he strode up to the MC and leaned in, asking her, "Hey, miss, what would you like to have?" She looked at him, totally baffled, then blurted out a thank you for saving them, and the princess paused, thought it over, and decided she owed him an apology. The protagonist snapped, "Next time, just listen to someone else's advice, please. Don't try to do it your way, seriously. People's advice." Alistella shot him a shocked look, like her mind just stumbled, and she thought, this isn't some vague excuse, right? It's real advice, so he has to be the kind of person like that. That girl challenged him, right? He knew it would happen. The Grey Wolf was coming. The wolves, those assassin nightmares, got wiped out, and the guild that came after them was annihilated. When her father heard the news, all he could see were bound, bloody assassins. People whisper that a backroom minister sat right among them, spilled the truth, and then shook so badly he swore he'd never face the public again. He pulled all the strings, didn't he? But why's he doing this much for them? The protagonist leaned in and snapped, "Don't get it twisted, this is personal. Because if they were hunted, it would hit him too. He's tied to them," so she gasped, "Wait, aren't you connected too?" And MC shot back, "I haven't heard from Edward yet." He'd been picked to put together a band of heroes, and he was meant to team up with her to make it happen, right when the princess thought, now it hit her this time, Act would be out of sight, so no one could criticize him. She asked him, but wait, he'd already shut it down, so why was she pushing the request? Frederica swallowed hard and admitted she was forced to agree she was completely misunderstood the master. Then the maid yanked out a whole stack of... He yanked the documents out of the drawer and barreled on because he'd been planning to help. Master Edward set the rules from the very start, while the princesses watched, waiting. Frederica blurted out in shock, "What?" and shoved the documents in Alistella's face. He scanned the papers, stunned a whole list of candidates for the heroes group, stacked so high it felt impossible in just a couple of days. The protagonist said no, and it wasn't just because of the request. They'd been picking the right people long before anyone ever asked. And honestly, did the princess even get it? They'd already seen Lawrence become a hero. She stared in shock, realizing just how real he'd seemed back then, right in the middle of their conversation. The whole thing was absolutely mind-blowing. She even said, "If it's really like that." They could have just said it outright, only the maid dropped that remark. People like that are called cinderes, right? The princess froze, then blurted, "What?" Frederica erupted into a giggle and said, "Seems like she's the only one who gets the master." The protagonist whipped around to Alistella, cheeks burning, and blurted, "He demanded to know if that was really all she needed, then he cut her loose." The girl answered, unsure, and said he could let her stay with him for a bit. Then the maid blew up, furious, and demanded, "Why?" The princess admitted she didn't fully trust the protagonist yet, and needed to figure out once and for all whether he was truly good or secretly evil. Frederica snapped, "What kind of selfishness is that?" And Alistella shot back, "A selfie, maybe. But she's got a recommendation letter from her father, the king of this country." So she yanks a document from her bag and shoves it right into the protagonist's face. The maid yanked the paper right out of her hands and snarled, "Now she'll finally see what's on it." Then she unfolded it, scanned the words, and read out loud, "Once the choosing of the hero's companions is finished, if the princess is accepted to serve as an assistant to the..." She spotted the guildmaster's seal on the paper and instantly realized the princess was watching now, then spun to her master, furious, and swore she'd drown the palace. Trapped in an endless prison of ice, he snapped at her to shut up because all her ranting was just pointless noise. He read the document himself, then declared, "From today on, I'll let her serve as my princess, right by my side." As his assistant, the maid snapped irritably, "What about her act? Did it tell you she would teach Alistella her duties?" Frederica, barely holding herself back, slipped silently to the door, grabbed. He yanked the handle and yelled royal or not. She had no right to expect special treatment. She snapped the door shut with a violent slam and stormed out, like the whole place shook with it. MC told the princess, basically saying, "Look, it's a formality since you're with us now." "Alice," Stella snapped back, telling him she'd better do her job right. She understood him. and if she had to, she'd shadow him non-stop, watching for every sign to prove whether he was truly the evil guildmaster or just pretending. He chuckled under his breath and told him, "Let her handle it." Frederica's day kicked off the moment the guildmaster's personal maid alarm screamed. She heard it ring and snapped awake fast. Through the haze of sleep, she mumbled, "Master, you really shouldn't do that," then stretched, fighting the urge to wake up reluctant as ever. She groaned as she hauled herself up, freshened up with her morning routine, straightened herself out, and slipped into her uniform. She stepped out and greeted everyone with a bright, cheerful good morning for the rest of the crew. Lily snapped her hand up and announced it was finally time for the morning meeting. He leaned in and asked if it was really true their master had eaten her cake. She nodded, and he admitted it was so delicious the girl practically lit up with joy, promised she'd work even harder to win him over, and vowed she'd keep learning and cooking. The chef snapped his head toward the maid and said he was back again, like he hadn't stopped lurking since last night. Lily huffed, because of course he was here again, and she still couldn't stand his stubborn presence. "What is she supposed to do?" Federica cut in. "I've got you. I understand." She stepped up, marched right to the newcomer, and ordered everyone to back off and trust her with it. As she walked up to the gate, she spotted Elanx and snapped, irritated on the spot. "Ugh, this sketchy chick has been loitering here since early morning. What a headache. But maybe she should finally dig into what she's up to." But it wasn't her problem still. The man shot his hands up and blurted, "I'm not a criminal. I'm the guildmaster of Home Heroes, a major guild." Frederica smirked, saying he must have been mistaken. "A major guild, Mr. Elanx." The man grinned in a groveling way and blurted, "It's Miss Frederica herself." Then he asked how the protagonist was doing, and the girl said the master was still asleep, so if he had business with him, he should set up a meeting in a hurry. He apologized, right on the spot, saying it was bad manners to show up that early, then explained the protagonist was slammed, so setting up a meeting with him would be a real struggle. She leaned in and asked him, "So, what's your question? What do you want to know?" And he finally blurted, "It's about the main character himself." He begged him to come back to his guild because years had already crawled by since his exile, and when he looked around, he saw the guild was hanging on by a thread, powered only by him. It was. It was way too late. He only wanted him to come to his guild and help rebuild it, because they were teetering on the edge of collapse. The man crumpled to his knees and bowed so low it looked like worship. "Please, Federica," he begged, and rage barely simmered behind her eyes when she snapped, "This won't happen." Elanx froze in shock. "Why didn't you say expelling the master was justified? And now you're asking him to come back. Isn't that just selfish?" He swallowed hard and tried to smooth it over. "Then how about, why don't we make an alliance between our guilds?" The maid snapped, refusing without a blink. "That's a no, there's nothing in it for us. Let him go." The guildmaster hit the floor and grabbed her arm, pleading with everything he had, and then he blurted out, "Act is out here being merciful, saving the weak. Right. Let him help them too, please." But the girl snaps in rage, hurls him aside, traps him in ice, and screams at him to stop immediately. She said, "Master truly reaches out to the weak, and he offers hope, like it's a lifeline. But it's all for the greater good, because trash like him doesn't deserve it. Virtue." Elias shivered hard from the cold, fighting to speak, but the words just wouldn't come. The maid took one look at him, snapped her fingers, and the ice melted. Like it was never there. Then she said she was sorry for her outburst, because she understood his need to reach the master, but she didn't let him finish. "Doesn't he have anything else to do? He needs to rebuild his guild himself," Elang blurted, and that got Frederica to snap back. "Yeah, right. That's completely impossible. I banished him for being useless." The master would have warned him he had to be incredibly strong and skilled, because it was still something he could handle alone. And the guildmaster wasn't about to let that slide. It was simply too early to lean on anyone else. He pushed his project anyway, but the maid snapped a warning at him. "Try to worm your way to the protagonist with tricks," and she couldn't promise he'd live through it. "Got it," she demanded, then walked away, leaving him stuck there, kneeling at the entrance. She still remembers the day she was a magical beast, back before everything changed, and the story of the protagonist. He'd told her, "If you've got nowhere else to go, come with me." Keeping that kind of power hidden underground was a crime. He was building a guild, and she'd be the missing piece. Frederica swore she'd shield his guild so it could keep living by his ideals then, sometime later, out in the Heian desert, way out east of the protagonist's guild. 3 adventurers ran straight into monsters, and when Bress roared for her companions to lock in and guard the caravan, the other adventurer gasped, "Wait, those monsters." The girl snapped back, "Yes, strong ones too." The boy frowned, "I see." And when he looked at the situation, everything felt grim. The adventurer leaned in and said, "This isn't something hope can fix. Only an army can." One monster planted itself right in front of them, blocking their way. Then the adventurer blurted, "Whoa, look, it's a stone dragon." He ordered Brez to bolt, and the girl staring at the monster closing in said, "It's already impossible." And right then, Lawrence burst onto the scene. He vanished, and he snapped, "No, don't write it off yet. It's too early to give up." He tore forward to strike the monsters, cut them down one after another, and in seconds, it was over. Then he leaned in and asked. They snapped, "Are you all still alive?" And the adventurers immediately started to confer. Lawrence confirmed they were okay, told him no thanks were needed because he only did what a real hero is meant to do. Bressra gasped in shock. Standing right there was a hero, that golden glow on the sword's blade. And could it really be Lawrence, the hero of the dawn? The boy just chuckled awkwardly and shrugged. "Don't be so surprised." She demanded to know if he was stranded alone out there in the desert and where his companions had vanished. To the hero just shot back that they'd left the girl moments ago. The girl stared at him, totally baffled. Why? And when she asked, Lawrence snapped back that they'd told him they couldn't keep up because he didn't even get what was going on himself. Bress stared at the fallen stone dragon and thought, "Yeah, this is going to be rough. Getting a team together is hard when someone can feel it with a single hit." She told him not to lose heart. He just laughed and said, "Thank you," and then assured her, "Nothing to worry about. I'll find good guys soon." Bress clocked that confidence immediately. Lawrence confirmed it, like it was obvious. The kingdom's most trusted man was picking his comrades one by one for the battle that was about to explode. Battle raged, and then, sometime later, early in the morning, the dining room at Axe Mansion was loud with nonstop chaos. He slipped downstairs and caught the girls mid-argument, the whole fight already buzzing in the air. Frederica blurted to Alistella, "Wow, are they really using that excuse to keep us here?" And the princess shot her a confused look like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" The maid snapped that she'd tell her immediately, because the master and she are bound together tightly. Alistella snapped, stunned, "She doesn't belong here." Then Bertarica shot back fast, "Yes, are they in love? They are." The protagonist steps into. The dining room shut them down, and the princess snapped at the maid, calling her a liar. "That's not true." But the maid snapped her head toward the MC and demanded he tell the princess she's his only fiancée, and then she grilled him on how the heck he even managed to get down here in the first place. Alistella greeted him with a bright, "Good morning," and the protagonist shot back the same then. Frederica blurted, "All guilty. Please forgive me." She'd totally blanked on the master's wake-up time because he'd told her to ignore it and reminded her she was the only servant he had. The maid gasped, "Only one acting it," said, "Well, they've got this special bond." Federica's face fell as she agreed, like, of course, that's what he'd do. He understands her, the protagonist realized, and then it hit him. Just one freeloader walks in, and the whole place suddenly turns loud. Right on cue, Hayes, the head chef of his mansion, showed up with breakfast, served it to him and the girl. The girl leaned in and told him breakfast today was chicken and vegetables, with Aurora sauce. The MC thanked the girl, and the cook leaned in close, whispering that it was. Frederica actually snagged a real friend, and the protagonist blurts it out in shocked disbelief, "A friend." Federica giggled and basically declared, "Girls just don't get how adults act." Alistella seethed. How could she dare say something like that about a princess? The maid snapped that her respect belonged only to the master, and that if you weren't her, some other girl would be sold off in your place. The princess snorted. What impudence could this even be called friendship? Frederica shot back. That's what happens with friends sometimes. She realized, wait, this is the first time I've ever been this furious. And it hit her how surprisingly strong their bond had been. Hayes grinned at him and said, he said he needed to learn how to understand girls' hearts. Then he shot back, grumbling that he didn't need any of that. After breakfast, he snapped that they had to head to work, and Alistella spun toward him. Frederica thanked him for the hairpin, but the ornament already sat on her own head, so she snapped, "What is that supposed to mean, a gift for another woman?" And the protagonist fired back. It's a magical item that recognizes identity. If the royal family got wind of it, they'd blow everything up with unnecessary drama. Federica blushed and admitted it that same hairpin. Forgive her for the sudden way she blurted it out. She just needed you to understand how important it is to the princess. Derica froze at those words and let out a loud exhale. MC snatched the doorknob and clocked exactly what she was doing. They had to get out, now. The maid blurted out, "Can I get something too?" And he just shot back, "You don't need identity recognition." She muttered, "That's not the point." As soon as they stepped inside, every guild member greeted their master with a loud, cheerful good morning. Then they turned and bombarded the question, "Who's the girl with you?" He introduced her to his staff and announced, "From today on, you're officially one of us." Everyone lit up with delight, so this was his student. And wow, she was even sweeter than they expected. They were thrilled to meet her, and the women from team vied for the chance to ask the protagonist first, until a quick, heated argument broke out with shouts flying about whether she should really be taken to dinner. He objected, insisting that whoever reaches the goal first would win, and with a heavy sigh, the protagonist called the maid and the princess to follow him. "Go on, follow him," Alistella blurted, stunned, and asked if the guild ever took days off. He told her, twice a week, "If I don't rest, my productivity tanks." And she asked him again, "Does he even get to breathe when the guild shuts down?" No, he basically face plants into work. They don't get rest. It's 5 full days on the clock, then only 2 days off. For the first 6 months after joining, they cover their living costs and house them in the dorm. Frederica even points out that newcomers get special support. Even if the mansion has spare rooms, you don't gamble with emergencies. You prep for them. Night quests are usually off limits, but if everyone agrees, exceptions slip through. The MC muttered under his breath, and nobody said a word about overtime. Frederica snapped, "No, this is their opening, because when he talks about his subordinates, he always lets his guard down, and they need to seize this chance to use Alistella and push their reach wider." Alistella blinked, stuck on the word use, but then she had to admit, yeah, it sounded true. Yep, up to now, not a single guild has cared this hard about its own members, so why is he keeping it hidden? Camouflage for the observer, she said, like it was obvious. If you really stop and think about it, what's the point of that camouflage? Why bother with something so useless? The protagonist shut it down fast. Conversation's over, everyone back to work. Federica sighed, regret dripping off every word. Ugh, he's at it again. Then she leaned in and snapped, "Why are you so damn sullen with that attitude? Once word gets out, everyone will steer clear, because Alistella really is kind." The princess stared at her, stunned, and the maid blurted, "Is something wrong?" Alistella flashed a calm smile. "No problem. Everything's fine," she added. "She has to go too." Frederica nodded right on cue. "Exactly. She's got work to do." The girl asked, "What kind?" Then they marched into the protagonist's office, right when a knot suddenly formed. A knock hit the door, and his subordinate slipped in, nodded, and greeted him. Act promptly started. He told them the guild was packed with quests today, so they better get moving and handle it. Then Maya burst into the room and wished him good morning too, so the protagonist immediately warned her to prep for monster hunting without going overboard. Zoe said she was heading to work, and he snapped back that there were tons of requests, meaning she'd better stick to her vacation plan. It was supposed to be a day off until a subordinate walked into the office, greeted the MC, and said he stopped by just to say good morning since he was passing through. The princess gasped, "Wait, does greeting the guildmaster in the morning fall on your shoulders?" And Frederica shot back, "No, absolutely not." Everyone goes along with it, because her master is famous, and the protagonist flat out calls it out, she's not his property. She grinned and said, "Of course this is where love slaves belong." He snapped back, "Nope, she's just a servant." The maid snapped back, "No, he was her master's property, period, so he could just accept it already." Alistella stared at them both, utterly stunned. She grilled Act, asking if he really tracked every guild member's schedule, when the protagonist said, "Of course." Act shot back that he's the one who assigns all the tasks. The master hands out the jobs, tailoring every task to each slant's skills in the guild. Then the princess blurts out, Federica beamed like it was obvious this is what their leader is, the best of the best, and the protagonist shot her a sheepish look and practically begged her to shut up, while Alistella just went, "I see." She tossed it in casually, apparently, that S-ranked guild, the one sitting second, barely has anyone on the roster. He told her that so many people were quitting, and it left her stunned, especially when the workplace was that good. MC let out a sly chuckle, eyes narrowing as he said, "All right, time to finally tell her exactly what kind of man he is right then." A chemist pounded on the door and demanded permission to enter right then, to rush in the moment she finally got permission. The girl stormed in and blurted out everything she'd been talking about to the protagonist, Alice. Della's world flipped. She was still a kid, and working like that was brutal. The protagonist snapped that it happened out of nowhere. Then the bomb dropped, she got fired, and he told her to get out. He told them to leave the guild, and Alice, Della plus the girl just froze at his words. Then the princess, trembling with emotion, snatched the girl into a hug and snapped, "How could you kick out a child like that out of nowhere?" Act stepped in because she's still a kid, she's just not strong enough. Adventuring demands real muscle, and that kind of work isn't for her. The princess fought back, but he hauled her into the guild anyway, since the protagonist had given the okay, only for her to end up as a total deadweight employee. Alistella stared, completely dumbfounded. How was that even possible? The chemist just shrugged and told her it was fine. She'd already accepted she was useless, but she was still thankful MC kept looking after her right up to this moment. The princess in despair blurted, "Oh my God," and demanded she had to be there, but the protagonist shot back, dead serious. "No, there's nothing here for her." The girl snapped with surprise. "What do you mean?" Then he spun toward Federica, and the maid shoved the papers at the chemist. "These are for her next job, here's the info." She stared at the papers, stunned out of her mind, and the protagonist declared, "I know you're weak, but your alchemy talent is absolutely flawless." Then the alchemist guildmaster chimed in, "I'm not hiring just anyone, I need a real, capable assistant." Alistella blurted in shock, "Wait, the same elite alchemist guild in the capital?" Chemist just stared, admiring that perfect setup, then snapped, "Pack your things now." Alistella promised she'd give it everything, and the protagonist warned her, "Don't forget to ask for your moving expenses before you go." With happy eyes sparkling, she swore she would. She thanked him deeply for everything, and then right on the spot, offered a heartfelt apology. The princess froze, staring at him like she was totally lost, then blurting out, "Wait, what was that just now?" The MC shot back, "Sure, any guild can see that, right? Expulsions always come sooner or later." Alice Deluxe tried to claim otherwise, but setting up a proper place and even covering the moving costs is still where the truth hits. He shrugged it off and said he's just doing what has to be done to chase his dreams, and she repeated it back like it was impossible to ignore. He blurted it out in shock ambitions, a party for the hero. Was that what he really meant? And then the protagonist answered, "Yeah, of course." The princess couldn't stop pondering. Was she planning to form a guild just to kick people out and deal with this nightmare of a hassle? What on earth is she thinking? The MC snapped that time was up and told her to call the next one. Then another guild member barreled into the office, breathless and apologizing. After a while, Act snapped that the workday was done and told everyone to head home. Home. Frederica watched him and realized he'd exiled 5 people in a single day. He just shrugged and said, "Yeah, it's been a lot today." Alice Stella warned, "If you exile people that often, I'm scared nasty rumors will spread." And the protagonist shot back, "So you finally get what kind of person I am." The girl nodded yes. He was kind, caring, the real deal, and he shot up in shock like, "Wait, what are you even talking about?" At that exact moment, Frederica snatched the princess's hand and said, "Yeah, so you get it now." The master would never exile guild members over something this small. He towered over every mediocre guild master, and Alistella agreed, so the protagonist invited them home the moment they walked out of the office. They found the tables already set. The guild members dropped into their seats, and right away they started rolling in their allies for a full dinner plus drinks to cap off the workday. They still hadn't eaten, right? The princess stared at Frederica in shock and blurted, "Is it always like this here?" The maid just nodded and said, "Yeah, we wait until the workday's over." Her jaw dropped so hard, it felt like the moment would never end. She spun toward the protagonist and blurted, "Seriously, he's got everyone's attention." The maid snapped back, "Of course he does. He's the best guildmaster around." When the allies finally burst back home, the protagonist. He tagged the papers right on the table, ready to dig in and review the documents. Frederica barged in, shoved a cup of hot tea at him, and told him she'd brought it while he just stared like, "I didn't ask for this." The girl answered with a perfect bow like a top-tier maid. She brought exactly what her master wanted, right on cue. Even without being asked, the protagonist snapped, "Fine." Then he let her go while Frederica clocked the papers and realized, wait, didn't he tell them himself not to work overtime? MC shot back that it was a king's order and told Lawrence to find comrades worthy to be his partner. The maid scanned the news clippings and gasped. Lawrence had just obliterated an ancient earth dragon in a single strike, and she couldn't help wondering if there were any challengers left, even if that sounded like a dumb question. If it was him, everything would click into place guaranteed. Act said, yeah, of course he wasn't about to ditch the job he'd already taken on. Frederica fired back, saying she knows it, so who could even measure up to a hero like this? He grinned and said, sure, there are a few, but one of them is a walking problem. She caught what he meant. Olga, the spearman, and still, doubt nagged at her. The protagonist pushed her, asking why she thought everything would be fine, and the maid answered with a calm truth he'd noticed far more than any of them mere humans ever could. When those golden eyes flare, victory is right within his reach. Too bad the protagonist is still red-faced with embarrassment. Embarrassment hit her hard. She snapped that she shouldn't act like she knows it all, then forced out, okay. But she always keeps an eye on every step he takes, and still, she can't smother him, so she has to back off and let him handle his own well-being. MC tried to slide into bed without telling him, but he cut in and asked her right then to give his shoulders a quick massage. Frederica looked delighted and practically lit up as she agreed. Then she leaned in and told him, let him lie down on the bed. She promised to work out the ache with a massage on his lower back, but the protagonist shut her down and refused. Later, out on the Tamaz Plain, miles from the guild, a crew of wood. Adventurers stalked the monsters, and a lookout ripped into the air with a warning shout to his comrades. He'd stumbled on a pack of orcs, and one of the adventurers blurted, so how many of them are there? The lookout stared in shock, couldn't count anymore, and blurted, forget it, there's 100 of them. 100 orcs right there, a full pack. The adventurers gawked like, 100? But the quest said 50, so something's definitely off. We've got to haul ass and get out of here now. Right there, out of nowhere, Olga burst in at that exact moment and blurted out. They look completely pathetic, then he storms in, fights the monsters alone, and wipes them out in seconds, leaving the whole group stunned. The whole group stared in disbelief. He'd wiped out an entire horde of orcs like it was nothing, and they had to know who was he. Then, the boy stepped up and told them they should. Be grateful he showed up, then watch every one of his victories unfold, because right there, waiting before them, was Lord Olgar, a terrifyingly skilled spearman. And at that exact moment, Lawrence burst into the protagonist's guild greeting the protagonist finally showed up, and the two of them admitted it had been way too long. Act shot back. Are you okay? All right, the boy insisted he was totally fine. Then his eyes snapped to Alice. Alistella flashed a grin, introduced himself, and told her his name. The princess gasped in shock then. With the confidence of a true hero of the dawn, she replied. She snapped back that she was MC's assistant, then told her own name too, right as the girl cut in and said, she knew him, he fights giants. And even the strongest heroes, Lawrence said it. He admitted it with a shy grin. Turns out he's got a ton left to master, especially when you stack him up against the protagonist. He's basically a total newbie, so the protagonist offered him a seat and told him that Frederica was. If Alistella wasn't available today, she'd be stepping in right away, and the protagonist immediately spotted someone else. The one person who finally got him, he told her, good luck, and then pushed the moment forward by asking her to. To take care of the act, the MC snapped, what happened so suddenly? And the guy bowed in apology, then asked, why? He called out to him, and the protagonist answered, I'm hunting for companions. Lawrence shot back, since I'm already on the... In that moment, everything felt peaceful, so they just stood by waiting for one of them to make the move. The protagonist answered, yeah, you should wait After a bit, he promised he'd be back soon. Then Olga's voice cut through the silence, and he snapped around. He spun toward the MC and barked, so did they call him? Then Act shot out an apology for yanking him in so suddenly, and the spearman answered, yeah, somehow, he carved out a pocket of time from that insane schedule, and there he is, in the chair. Lawrence, the hero of the dawn, right? Right, the hero grinned at him, agreeing with a confident nod, and welcomed him in. Alice, Stella blinked in confusion as the other guy snapped back. He's Olgar, give him a spear, and there's nobody his match. Tell him to remember that. Then Alice muttered, stunned. So arrogant. Olgar turned to everyone and demanded, all right, what's the point of this meeting? The protagonist snapped his finger and pointed straight at Lawrence, saying he needs real strong partners and they've decided to take a serious look at him. The spearman blurted out, "So that means he's at peace now he truly earned it, because only he can be a worthy partner." Lawrence grabbed his hand hard, held on for a beat, thanked him, and then added. Olgar's laugh burst out as he said, "That's right, so you've been waiting for someone just like me." The protagonist ordered him to stop, and the spearman froze in total confusion. So why was this happening? Act said that someone like him stood zero chance against Lawrence if only Lawrence showed up. If he keeps clowning around, he'll wreck his whole plan. Algar shot up, stunned. "What and yeah, those words don't come out of nowhere." The MC shot back, "Yeah, there are." And with how well he knew that guy, he didn't just think so, he was 100 certain. Spearman begged them to forgive him, then hit the road and vanished. He told the protagonist, "Stop butting in and you might finally see what you're capable of. Then you'll become Lawrence's comrade, carve a path to glory, and shut down that meddling guild for good." The protagonist shrugged and told her to let him chase whatever he wanted. Then the princess snapped, stunned. "Are you sure?" Olga burst into laughter and declared, "Just wait, this will blow his fame up even bigger." "All right, let the master watch him, and he'll beam with pride at being part of his guild," the MC said. "Ah, certainly." The spearman roped the surprised Lawrence into it, calling out, "Stick with me, act up if anything else shows," and made sure it was ready for trouble. The protagonist cut ties and said he'd quit the guild himself, because if things got brutal later and he begged to return, it'd already be too late. The spearman snorted, vowed he'd come back and team up with the hero crush the Demon King and wear that victory with pride, then snapped that until then, the hero shouldn't wait, because he'd be just fine. MC blurted, "Oh, great. Lawrence, he's called back again." The hero shot to his feet. Then he lifted his gaze to the protagonist, and with her quiet, "Okay," he slipped away with the spearman while the princess frowned and muttered, "This Olgar's kinda unpleasant." Then the protagonist shot her a question, what made her think that? The girl insisted he cared for him with all his heart, and he fired back with the same kind of conviction. Then Axe stepped in and told her not to burn all her energy on anger. She tossed in, like it was nothing, Lawrence was about to team up with his new comrade. So tell me, why would he do all that if he could have just brought them together in the first place? Wouldn't that have worked just the same for the protagonist? The antagonist leaned in and warned that in just about 2 weeks, everything would finally click into place. Weeks passed, and then Lawrence finally reached out. The protagonist burst out through the transmitter, shouting that something terrible went down, then he demanded to know what exactly happened. The hero snapped back, then Olgar vanished into thin air. Weird. Alice Della shot a tired, restless look at MC, then after a while just kept staring. A bone-chilling scream ripped through a tavern in the heart of the city of Noya, when Olgar erupted in pure outrage. He snapped, "Man, this is a living nightmare. Every day of these training sessions feels like hell." And then he just couldn't shake it. Why the hell had he ended up as the hero's comrade? Right then, Lawrence snapped that it was time for the 100-kilometer run, then 10,000 spear swings, and the spearman immediately protested, "No way." He was done, plain and simple. "I'm dying like this." And then it hit. He was walking away for good, fed up with everything. He replayed his last talk with the protagonist in his mind, and that realization hit him hard. He started to think, but even though he snapped it out like that, the truth was totally different. Now that he thinks about it, the place felt perfect, so why couldn't he go back? Ford's words were right there, and at that exact moment, he wished him. "Good evening." The spearman stared at him, totally thrown off, and demanded to know who he was. The kid shot an apology his way, told him his name, and then declared he was a scout on a mission to find capable people for the guild. Recognized him on sight because he was the world's deadliest spearman, Olgar, immediately. With a solemn look, he let out a chuckle and declared, like it was no big deal, that it was so. Lord looked him dead in the eye and said, "You just wiped out 100 orcs all by yourself." And yeah, he absolutely earned the title of. The spearman cracked a laugh and told Ford he could tell he wasn't just good, he was a true connoisseur of skill, so they needed a capable man. The scout shot back, "Yep." Then he leaned in and told him Olgar should be turned into a combat instructor for their guild. The guild fell silent, then the spearman stared at him, shocked, shouting, "Instructor!" After the scout snapped, "Is something wrong?" Everyone like him, armed with real martial arts skill, realized just how damn valuable he was. This mission wasn't about clashing with foes at all. It was something way nobler, and he felt it in his bones. Olga let out a shocked drawl. Is that so? So Ford basically shrugged it off and said, yeah, it really didn't matter that much anyway. He said taking down the Demon King is a hero's job, but can you really become someone great by... After he and the hero crushed that foe, the spearman straight up admitted it word for word, just like he said. Like a frog stuck in a tiny well, Lawrence's strength is way too big to contain. Scout tapped the spearman's shoulder and said, that's it, you're built for the instructor role. And it's a cushy job, comfortable days. Fat paychecks, too. The boy nodded. I see. Then, at that exact moment, the protagonist's voice cut in. He ran out of options, then snapped, Hey, Spearman, is he here? The spearman muttered, Yeah, he's here. Olga shot up in shock. Guildmaster. They hadn't laid eyes on each other in ages. Then the protagonist clocked Ford and realized he'd become the deputy guildmaster of a hero of all seasons. Scout blurted that he remembered him. What an honor, and MC nodded like, Yeah, cool, but I've got business to handle right here. The spearman grabbed his head, panic flooding in. Tell me what to do. Olga finally swallowed his doubts and insisted on trusting him like he was nothing. Then he leaned in and said he'd heard rumors about to spill. No, he didn't escape. The boy seethed with indignation, and the protagonist snapped that Lawrence's. Because his training crushed him, he bolted running from it, and he'd been right about what was coming. He's just small fry, nothing more, Olgar snapped, seething with anger. Did he just call him small fry? Act said, Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He bolted with his tail tucked tight, convinced he'd never stand a chance against Lawrence. And after that, what's he even hunting for, if not tiny nobodies? Olgar snapped, annoyed to the bone. That, not a small fry, main character flat out told him he was even weaker, so the spearman snapped, Prove it, and dared him to fight if he pulls out a win, the master will have to eat his own words, and the protagonist lets out a smug chuckle in response. All right, he said, fine. But if he wins, Olgar will have to admit he's weak, and the other guy fired back. He couldn't afford to lose, so when Axe spun to leave, he threw Olgar a challenge and told him to follow. Spearman fumed at the protagonist, calling him an idiot always glued to that table, like he couldn't possibly lose. Ford trailed right behind them, watching helplessly as they lost to him. He finally looked like he'd made up his mind, had finally clawed his fighting spirit back because one more hit like that and he'd have completely fallen apart. And Act Age isn't. It's not that simple once they finally show up at the training center run by the protagonist's guild. Lawrence and Alistella erupted into the arena, grinning with joy as the world turned their way like they'd just won the moment. The girl shouted to the protagonist, and he wheeled around to face Olgar as she added, Prodigal burst back, he's over the moon. Olgar confused, completely thrown. Tossing out his ally's name, he snapped, he still hasn't come back. Then declared it, plain Act is the one he came to beat. C declared they'd go to war with him right now, and the princess snapped, stunned. Wait, what are you even talking about? Stop this right now. Lawrence placed his hand on her shoulder and murmured, It's all right, your act is strong. And she told herself she already knew, just like the girl told him. But Algar wouldn't fold, he's no weakling either, and the hero even admitted he's got wicked quick hands. Adventurers of S rank and up, forged by Mr. Act, wield insane strength. Alistella gasped, Wow. She tried once more to shut those opponents up, and just as they kept calling for help, the hero snapped, They're ready, let the fight begin. Olgar straightened into a fighting stance and sneered, So he's strong, I'll make sure he proves it. The spearman erupted forward like lightning, fast enough to blur the air. He rocketed into a fast lunge at his opponent and the protagonist. Dragonus just twisted aside from the strike. Olgar's blow went wide. He blinked, stunned, and wondered. He gasped in shock. Wait, did he dodge? Alistella blurted out. Lawrence stared, stunned. No way that worked. He just slipped that lightning-fast hit, like their master always does. Ask the spearman, go on. What is this supposed to be? Is this really his breaking point? The boy exploded forward and attacked the protagonist with fresh, raging power, yet the protagonist calmly parried every single strike, one after another. Every single one of his attacks. Exhaustion crushed him. He dropped to his knees. MC smirked and drawled, Well, look who's here with me. That heroic squad is getting crushed, no question about it. Wait, does he finally get it? He hasn't taken a single step, not even once. The prince. Princess went pale because even as a fighter, he couldn't land a single hit on him. Olgar muttered, sheepish but shaking with awe, This is true power. That's not true. He's nothing like that. He's hailed as the strongest spearman then. With those words ringing in his ears, he shot to his feet and it doubled his strength. His aura surged so hard it even brushed the princess. And the spearman stared in stunned awe, thinking, had he been this strong all along? Tucking away that massive magical power for all this time. Next time fine right now, he's not playing, he's going in, and he's about to crush the protagonist shows up again, and this time, the main character shuts him down so hard, you can feel it. Delivered a crushing blow without ever budging from his spot. And the boy flipped through the air like a spark, landing hard in the middle of the act. That punch landed perfectly. Olgar was sprawled on the floor, stunned to the bone, and then he tried to start speaking. He began C. Despair erupted from his mouth, and then MC fired back. Here's proof. The spearman is done for, weak, trembling, and barely holding it together as he struggles. Teetering on the edge of getting up off the floor, anger flared in his words as he snapped. They'll clash again. Axe shot him down, said it was hopeless. Even if he battled him again and again, he'd never claw his way to victory because every time, he just kept embarrassing himself. As the protagonist passed Lawrence, he flat out told him, I'm handing this to you. Lawrence nodded and said he understood, and then the hero strode up to the spearman, calling him by. He named it and said it was a great fight, especially that last devastating blow. Blow, and you could see it, clear as day, every bit of his training had paid off. The boy, moved by all that concern, looked up and said the other kid's name. Name gritted his teeth and barely kept himself in check. He roared at the protagonist, telling him he'd grow even stronger than he is right now, and pushing him until he finally has to admit it. He would claim what was his by the very next day. The princess spun toward the protagonist with shining eyes and demanded, Did you see today's newspaper? Lawrence and his squads barreled through the demon clan, and it looks like they've finally crushed them. And Olgar absolutely crushed it, earning himself the title of general, while the MC just sat there calmly, sipping his. His tea snapped. Is that so? Alistella kept going. Tell me, was this training match set up to boost the spearman's spirit? Spirits. He snapped back that she was spiraling in her own head because, hey, he was too kind to let her keep talking. Talk nonsense, the girl mumbled, sheepish, and Federica practically lit up. Because, nope, she loved that exact quality about him. She did too, blushing hard. The princess froze with embarrassment, mumbled something, and then finally bowed her head to apologize. The maid shot a glare at the girl, wondering if she was just playing hard to get. The protagonist snapped his head toward his loyal assistant and ordered her not to reveal what yet. The maid froze, her eyes wide, like even her ears and tail couldn't stop twitching. She went quiet and then said, Okay, I heard you. He felt it too, like he noticed at the same time, right? And then she slipped in, By the way, did you see Lawrence? Lawrence read the report, and Olgar had changed so completely he looked like a new man he was training with relentless focus, while Frederica. She flung her arms out, wrapped him from behind in a tight hug, and kept talking, saying he'd made him quit the guild to slam the door on his escape route. And then those words. Every one of them was the master's kindness, meant to push her forward, and it finally taught her not to go hunting for secret meanings like the others. Even the maid said it, even if nobody else could figure it out. She felt his awkward kindness, so she hugged him tighter and told him that even if only a handful understood, even if everyone hated him, she still believed in him. She'd stand by him alone, serving him until death finally took her. He tried to rip free from her tight embrace, but she didn't even notice, so he finally gave up. She just let her do whatever she wanted, Federica clocked it, but he didn't tell her to go at that exact moment. Fort watched, stunned, as the maid wrapped her arms around the protagonist. Scout stared at the protagonist like, because of him, Lawrence's comrades started piling up one new ally at a time. If it's just one person, he'll keep it quiet, he won't report a thing. It's within the margin of error, though. Yeah, could. Could it really be her? He leaned in close, his eyes narrowing on Federica, trying to confirm what he was seeing, noting that if this threw a wrench in the plan, then just like clockwork, everything was about to collapse, but his gut instinct nailed it. For now, he could only watch right there, in that exact moment. The protagonist felt something off and snapped a quick look out of the side window. Sometime later, right at dawn outside the guild, Frederica flashed a final grin and said, That's it for today. And the protagonist answered, saying, He raised a hand to the door and heard something rattling from the inside. Then the maid froze, listened hard, and blurted out in shock, "That voice." No way. When they stepped inside, they instantly heard Rosalia's. Helia blared into the guild like a megaphone, greeting the guildmaster with a loud voice, "Vanguard number 1. Number 1 blurts out that it's been forever since they last saw each other, and the protagonist immediately asks, "Are you okay?" But the girl just erupts with, "I missed him so bad, it felt like I was going to drop dead. He was terrifying today." Federica snapped, and Rosalia shot back, "You don't die from loneliness." The guildmaster meant everything to her, and the maid snapped, eyes blazing, voice sharp. "Is she flirting with the master again? Stop this." Rosalia clung to the protagonist and blurted, "That's Federica." The maid gasped. "Exactly." Rage swallowed her whole, and Vanguard spun toward MC, saying she had. She said she'd introduce him to someone she liked later, then he grilled her for the details like, "Who is it?" The girl swore it was true, and he didn't waste a second. He pushed on, saying he still had business with her. She's got to go with him too, and she'll follow, because the protagonist snapped around, all irritation spilling off him. Frederica, he snapped at her to brew them some tea, and even with rage pounding inside her, the girl managed to say she'd do whatever they asked. He blurted, totally confused, "Why are you mad?" And Rosalia snapped back, cold as ice. "Everything. Their master is still the same as they step into the office." The girl leaned in and demanded, "So what's your problem with me? What business do you even have with my life?" So with her, if this was an invitation to stay the night, could he at least ask her for just a little more time? She'd just hauled herself back from an adventure, and she was nowhere near ready for what came next. The protagonist snapped back sharply, "No." Vanguard drawled, "What a shame, because she was about. She would have handed over every inch of herself to him in a heartbeat if he ever decided to make a move. All he had to do was tell her any time." Then the MC, flat out, told her he wasn't sleeping with his subordinates, so she stared and basically said, "Wait, are you threatening to send me?" Send her to another guild. He urged her to quit messing around and get down to business. Then he called her to tell. When she heard she'd been kicked out of his guild, the girl shot a shocked gasp and blurted. Then, boom, right between them, a blazing, fiery vortex tore open out of nowhere. Mazzari burst out of the shadows, furious, yelling that she can't just sit there and stay quiet because he not only tricked her master, now he's throwing her out like she's nothing. Wait, is he serious? MC. She caught Esterozelia totally off guard. Wait, who is this fairy? The girl stared, stunned, and blurted, "It's Mazzari." She leapt in and saved her during the fire dragon's rampage when there was nowhere left to run. She brought her along, and the protagonist went, "Got it now, tell me about the exile." Mazzari snapped in fury. "Don't let him brush me off. He needs to listen to what I'm saying." The fairy burst into flames and transformed into a blazing pillar of... And then she launched a brutal strike at the protagonist. Her hit snapped him back and cut off his words mid-scream. Rosalia shot into the closet, furious, and barked orders at her assistant, yelling at her, "What is she even doing?" Then Mazzari slams back into human form. She blurted out, stunned, there's no way she'll confess it, not when it's shocking that a weak little nobody could be her mistress's guildmaster. Act shut his eyes and muttered, "Not bad at all, your magic's got real bite." Then he nodded hard. "All right, you're in. Get her into the guild. Mazarix." He snapped, "Stop, your arrogance is getting under my skin, and I need to know, are you seriously trying to get some..." Rosalia snapped at her assistant, furious, and demanded, "That's way too much. Let her slip outside and cool that burning heat." The fairy whipped her head toward him and hissed, "I hate you. Because of you," she snarled. "I got scolded her, and she snapped back into a roaring pillar of fire, then vanished from the office like a flash. Rosalia bowed with perfect manners and apologized, but the protagonist shrugged and told her he didn't care at all. But she'd already landed a really great shot. Vanguard nodded like he was all in, praising her like an elite support. So that's why she got welcomed into the guild, but when it came to her personality, he smirked, like, "Yeah, that's the real story." And it all started right there, at that. Frederica burst in at that exact moment, staring at him in shock and asking why he did it. Yet MC didn't even look up, just told Rosalia, "Relax here, they don't pick people based on character. He'll handle the guild ID arrangements." Rosalia thanked him, and the maid demanded what he meant. He leaned in and said they were about to talk about Rosalia's expulsion. Frederica burst out in pure joy. "It's about time!" And right then, an angry voice from Mazzari snapped through outside the window. What were they even talking about? Later, right by the entrance to the Sukur labyrinth, Mizari snapped and grumbled about the protagonist. That guy is so annoying. Annoying. Henry snapped at her. Don't you dare say that. The Guildmaster's actually awesome, so cool. Then the fairy stared at her, totally baffled, and asked, why? Ride fired back, because he, Ride, sees the hidden essence. Bridge nodded along, then Mazar snapped, what's wrong with you two? And Henry shot back, the Guild. The Guildmaster turns out to be genuinely kind, and the whole team backs her up, but Mizari refuses to believe it, and she presses on. She asked her miss. Her mistress demanded exile, she refused, and that refusal shut the door, so he flipped the plan and changed course. Changed his mind. Mizari's eyes widened in shock and did her mystery. Mistress had a strange suggestion, and just like that, she snapped into something totally different. She looked around, wary, and told her savior, there's a secret passage ahead. Vanguard snapped back. I can't see a thing. The fairy told them it was just an illusion wall. Then Henri snapped, hold up, let them wait. I think she needs to check something first. Something, Mizari blurted, then he snapped, better hurry, and dove straight inside. Roselia snatched her assistant by the collar, yanking her closer in a single, sharp move. The collar yanked her away and hissed, do you really want to kill me? Don't you dare do that again. The fairy fumed, glaring hard, then snapped, so what's wrong with you? Everything was totally fine. Then Roselia shot her hand straight through the spatial rift. They both stared in shock, realizing the storage room was actually a secret space, and as soon as the team stepped inside, Mizari snapped at her mistress to follow right behind. The girl snapped to her assistant that noticing it was impressive, but didn't she see the trap? Throw yourself into a strange place, and anything could go wrong. The fairy flashed a grin and promised everything was fine, no traps lay on this side, and the exploration was officially over. No teleportation traps here, so Roselia said, no need to rush. And then Mizari. She blurted, let them see treasures. And just like that, she did it. It's all her doing. Henry spun toward Roselia with a sharp warning, and Vanguard barked at her assistant to back off in return. The fairy blurted out, totally baffled, then snapped, it's all fine. We just need to split the treasure fast, and reached for it. The treasure glimmered, and right at that moment, a magical aura burst into the air like lightning. Nora burst out of it, and Mizari snapped in shock. What is this? Roselia told him it wasn't just a barrier, it was pure magic. A teleportation seal that could yank you away in an instant. The fairy gasped, totally stunned. How is this even possible? There can't be any traps. This shouldn't be happening. The magical aura exploded across the crowd, wrapping every single person in its glow. When the trap went silent, Roselia snapped, everyone's still here, and Mazaria answered. Derry blurted the question, totally baffled. Where are they? The girl spun around, searching the room, then answered. It looks like a huge room then. Out of nowhere, the torches on the walls flare up, blazing brighter than ever. Mizari gasped in pure terror. What is this? What do you mean, Roselia Shah? Shouted at the team. Get ready, battles here. They're coming. The fairy blinked, utterly confused. Fusion, who's coming next? The girl shot the question back at her. This is the Labyrinth Master's room wait, because right as you step in, you'll see there. And there he stood, ruling the whole place like he owned the air. A colossal, bone-chilling monster crashed into view right in front of the team. The fairy stared in disbelief, and Roselia, Master of the Labyrinth, snapped at her to calm down, and she finally told. She snapped at her allies to stay locked together, teamwork first. Then she shouted, everyone, move forward. Meanwhile, Ford peered at them through a magical crystal ball and muttered, thanks to that idiot Mizari, the plan is finally going. Meanwhile, Roselia stepped up like a true hero too. Another obstacle slammed into her path, and it was time for her to vanish. Then, out of nowhere after a while, Mizari suddenly materialized inside the guild. They screamed in pure despair, drowning in tears. Please let them save her mistress if this keeps up, she's going to die. The protagonist heard her scream and shouted, what happened? She shot back, what happened? And right after that, they teleported straight underground. Underground stumbled straight into a trap and got trapped for good, ending up. Inside the Labyrinth Master's room, the adventurers started trading urgent theories because usually it takes 30 people to take down the Master. Is there really no way out? The protagonist demanded as he stomped down the stairs. Then he muttered, no way not after a master like this. Master's room until they are defeated. Then why was Mizari here? That girl. The girl shot back instantly. It's Ami's presence magic, because she could forge bodies out of pure wind, give them consciousness, and then he could be everywhere at once. So when he asked her, was the real body still trapped in the labyrinth? He blurted out in shock, of course the guildmaster knows everything. The MC just nodded and said, yes. Yeah, but then there's nowhere to run, she choked out, tears spilling over because of her, the mistress. The mistress is in real danger, and she knows she's asking for help in the most selfish way, but please, let them save her. After a quick, tense pause, the adventurers nodded in sync, because when a guild member is in trouble, everyone steps in. No questions asked. That's what it truly means to be precious talent. But he shot back, no. Even the guild's strongest Rosalia couldn't stand against this enemy, so tell me, do they really think they've got a chance? Mazzari blurted, wait, are you saying you want to ditch your mistress while she's in trouble? Federico was called out, and the maid snapped into view right away. And he blurted it out, everything was ready, and the preparations were finally complete. He wheeled toward Mazzari and told her, they had to. They had to go right now. The adventurers erupted with joy, and she finally felt safe, like there was nothing left to fear. Their master had a plan, and Frederica was shockingly strong on top of it. Mazzari stared at the protagonist and demanded, are you really going to help? And even after what she'd thrown at him, he snapped back that she had the wrong idea. It wasn't for her at all. Rosalia had jumped into this quest on her own terms. Every bit of responsibility landed on his shoulders, and deep down, he knew it was way too soon to lose someone like her. She thanked him, but if he left, nothing would change. Nothing would come of it. Frederica grinned and told her, I'll figure it all out on my own. Their master wasn't just merciful. He packed other killer strengths, too, as well. The allies sprinted straight for the Sucre dungeon, and the protagonist stayed one step ahead of everyone. Heard you then, the fairy snapped that he'd better hurry, because if traps were lurking, he'd stumble right into every single one. The maid flashed a reassuring, no worries, and the master ducked every trap and cut down every enemy Mazzari had to take note. She caught it with a jolt, and suddenly everything clicked, no traps, no enemies at all, just a well kind of silence that screamed something bigger. So what was this supposed to be anyway, and when did it stop making sense? She blurted, we got here in the blink of an eye, quickly staying locked onto the main route. The protagonist snapped them into action, and the allies sprinted after him Roselle. Zelia, meanwhile, fought for every breath and didn't let up. She desperately fought the monster, and in that moment, her thoughts screamed for survival. No matter how wild those tentacles looked, one thing was clear, they were coming for him. It looked like the demon was getting hit with something brutally hard. With a cruel sneer, he doubled down and unleashed an even harsher assault on her. She snapped with fury, what on earth is he going to say to them? And she snapped into action, bam, she activated her triple slap. He slashed through the battlefield and severed multiple tentacles. She thought it was finally working until the girls. Triple Dash slashed forward beside Violent Bloom, and she tore forward with everything she had. She only had one job, reach the end. The enemy's body. Then it hit her like a punch. The monster's tentacles had started growing again, and they were sprouting way too fast. She botched her plan, and the enemy's non-stop regeneration left her completely stunned. She kept getting crushed, and with every few attacks, the initiative slipped farther away from her. If she could somehow double her speed, would she finally pull it off? Just then, a pair of arms shot out and grabbed her, catching her mid-moment. Arms. Just as the moment demanded it, the protagonist showed up right on time, and Rosalia's jaw dropped at seeing him. The protagonist snapped his gaze to Frederica, and the maid pressed him to rush to the injured, tend their wounds, while she'd step in and handle the monster after the girl had taken the form of a magical beast, and then everything changed. She launched into a furious assault on the master of the labyrinth, and she shouted. In the human world, Rosalia snaps into a nightmare, now she's his enemy, and the demon just stares at her, completely thrown off, like he can't even process it. MC fired back, are you here to help me? And Axe snapped, don't you dare get it twisted. He only showed up because someone summoned him, so he sprinted through Missouri like a man on a mission, grinning the whole way. She hurled herself into her mistress's arms, and he snapped, hey kid, what about But what about the rest of the team? Fairy jutted his finger in one direction, and told him they were there because her real body was the one gripping the barrier tight. Tell him to tail her the protagonist. Seeing the wounded, Ride begins healing them right after that. He's on the move. He stared at his hurt leg, froze in shock, and blurted, "The pain's gone." Henri's jaw dropped. "No way, that's impossible. Guildmaster." "This is unreal." Mazzari grabbed his attention and demanded to know if it stopped both the bleeding and the pain, and when she pressed him, he admitted it was all thanks to time manipulation. He drags the body's internal clock to a crawl, and the damage freezes before it can get worse. The protagonist stared at Mazzari's double and realized the wind had whipped up a protective barrier. Then he gently stroked the fairy's head and told her, "You did an amazing job helping. And protecting, great job. Let her handle it. The rest is on him." Mazzari's eyes instantly brimmed with emotion. Roselia's team swore they wanted in on the fight too, but he snapped back that they weren't brave, they were just postponing the inevitable. If they gambled with death, it would only spark even bigger trouble still. Rosalia and Frederica stood with him and crushed the enemy. The protagonist whipped around to the fairy and demanded she protect them. Azalea told him the real nightmare wasn't the threat, it was those tentacles, way too many of them. He noticed too, of course, super. Regeneration was brutal. Rosalia knew it would take a massive crowd to shut it down, and she couldn't believe what she was seeing so many people. Only 3 of them remained. Axe snapped. "That's enough. 3 is enough." Then he spun to his comrades and roared, Now it was time to end this demon for good, and the girls jumped to it the moment he told them to. Frederica stayed in her transformed state and still pushed forward. She blasted her voice magic and slammed him with blocks of ice. Bursting out of the ground, it slammed shut around the demon like a steel trap. Rosalia blurted, "Super all the tentacles." Her rage froze everything in its tracks as she shattered the monster's limbs one by one. Then, one by one, they dropped off until Mazzari's scream tore through the air. More tentacles surged in, and Rosalia tore into the Labyrinth Master's defenses, shredding the whole control system. Fairy shot her magic back into action, and those broken limbs twitched back to life. That blast slammed into the protagonist too. Vanguard snapped, "What do you think you're doing? Back her up and let her act." She refused to stand down. She and the protagonist charged forward together. The protagonist launched forward and slammed into the enemy with unstoppable force, hitting them hard and fast. Rosalia blurted, "We did it! We won!" And then a dragon shot upward, clamped onto the monster's hair, and latched on for dear life. His gaze locked onto those eyes. This demon had taken way too many liberties. The demon froze, staring back in shock, and the MC snapped, He's injured his own subordinates, so that's a deadly crime, and now he's going to pay with death," he hisses, as he activates his skill and starts casting that comp. He just cracked open a complete time stop, and a crushing, powerful stream of sheer force tore through. A lethal surge of energy ripped straight toward the monster. Mazzari gasped in stunned disbelief as he made the final hit and finished the enemy. They just smashed the master of the labyrinth, so tell me, what the heck was that blinding light? She snapped around on her mistresses. His focus slipped, and the moment Axe started to crumble, he found himself falling helplessly from the heights. Frederica snapped up and carefully caught him right before he could fall. She felt it on her back, and the protagonist blurts, "Amazing work." Work. His wounded eyes fluttered closed, the maid thought, as expected. Expected of her master, he crushed it, and she carefully lowered. Then she dropped him to the floor and snapped into her human form, Rosalia. Staring at that monster pinned to the wall, "Go on, tell me, He stared in shock at what he'd just pulled off, then explained to her that it was a technique that shuts down the internal time of anyone who met its gaze. She pressed him, "So just by locking eyes with an enemy, you can instantly kill them." Mazzari stared in shock because with something like that, man, that power feels safe. "No problem," the protagonist said, and they tried to head back. Then suddenly, the MC staggered. Staggered Frederica and Rosalia snapped into action, gripping his arms and twisting him toward them, eyes full of worry, but he only responded with a flat nothing. Rosalia blinked in disbelief, then burst into laughter as she realized he was just swaying. Just like everyone predicted, he's the absolute best guildmaster they've got. A little later, in Axe's office, Mazzari choked out her heartfelt regret, admitting her careless choices had thrown her mistress and everyone else into real danger. She can't shake the regret. She's dead set on fleeing her mistress, because every mess she's made has dragged everyone else into it, and now she finally has to get out. And the protagonist too, because that last attack had taken everything out of him. That must have taken a brutal toll, right? She stared at his bandaged eye with pure remorse, then added, She snapped that the leader of the organization was injured, and now she didn't deserve to stay here. Then the fairy started to lurch forward like it was about. She tried to bolt into the sky, but the protagonist yanked her back, telling her it was way too soon to run. She was fresh meat in the guild, and new faces usually stir up trouble. At least that's what everyone expected, so Masari shot back her objections, completely baffled. But we weren't talking about any ordinary scale. This was the kind where the protagonist swore the dungeon support was nothing short of excellent. He shoved a document into her hands and told her, "Here's your guild mark, boom. You're officially in my guild." The fairies gaped at him in shock, trying to find words. Then the MC cut her off, saying she'd already confessed and was begging for help to try. She pushed herself to the limit, doing everything she could even when the dungeon was closing in. He refused to let go of someone who could move with surgical precision and ruthless efficiency. She swallowed her pride and pressed forward, now let her stand by Rosalia and everyone else. The fairies suddenly burst into tears, and they thanked him. With all their hearts, she even promised she'd do her absolute best, that she would. She'd throw every ounce of herself at it for him, and Rosalia flashed her assistant a warm smile acted spoken, and Rosalia, because she'd put the whole party in danger, was going to get suspended for a while, and the girl just stared at him in shock, suspended. Masari was shocked. She blurted that it was all her fault the group was in danger, but the protagonist snapped back that the leader owned the consequences of their actions, and the fairy scrambled to find the right words. Act told the guild they had a coastal refuge inside a villa complex, and Rosalia had to bring the party members there for 2 weeks. Got it. Let's go. Let everyone finally catch their breath and soak up the quiet, Masari questioned him. Totally baffled, half a month in that villa at the shelter, and Rosalia was still as. Stunned, her assistant froze. Then the protagonist cut in. Listen, at this point we can do whatever we want. Hit the beach, kick back, relax. I'll even hand you enough money to live so they wouldn't have to worry. Rosalia laughed first with a shy little giggle, then bursting out louder, and Masari joined in. The protagonist couldn't help but wonder why they were laughing in the first place. Rosalia called him by name and told him they'd have a good rest hit him at last. After a while, Rosalia's group kicked back and started enjoying their vacation straight up to the point it felt like a total win. Masari sprawled out on the beach, soaking up the sun, then turned to Rosalia and demanded, "Why?" So that's why they were trying to kick her out of the guild back then, because the girl said they planned to exile her and hand her over to the hero, Lawrence himself. Masari blurted out in shock, "Lawrence, the same great hero," but then she snapped, "Why won't you go?" Rosalia answered, "Because I can't stand the thought of leaving the protagonist behind." The fairy blinked in shock. "Wait, was that it?" The girl snapped out loud like, "Is that all?" That's weird, right? Why wouldn't you always want to be close to the one you love? And yeah, he's the kind of guy who's constantly thinking ahead for his subordinates, mapping out their future, step by step. When he has to banish someone, he rips the truth out without mercy, so nobody ever doubts him. But if that exile turns into suffering, the master steps in and yanks it back. And if it's truly the right call for them, the fair. Rosalia saw it clearly. He really thought about them with his whole heart, and that's why everyone loved him so. Masari sighed. "So that's it, huh?" So yeah, turns out she'd been unfair to him, and her master shut that down with his answer. Sure, that part's true, because this master always forgives. He believes the mistakes of... The pressure on his subordinates isn't theirs alone. Every bit of it lands on him too, so he can't stop now. It is his. Masari's face lit up when she heard those words about the protagonist, and Rosalia let out a heavy sigh as she muttered, "So he's got another rival." The fairy blinked, embarrassed. What is she even talking about? She was just talking. Then the girl burst out laughing, caught herself, and instantly blushed like crazy, so cute it hurt. And that's when she fell hard. "Love him too, huh?" Masari sputtered, cheeks blazing with embarrassment. Frederica shot up out of nowhere and blurted, "That's not true." And just like that, a rush of romance filled the air. He snapped and asked what kind of nonsense she was spouting, and the maid demanded he finally admit that she was his number one. He took over for him and made it clear every subordinate was equal. She didn't back down. She snapped back with the truth. "That's not what I'm talking about." She's stuck in his nonstop rambling, and it's unbearable, like she's trying to. And he said, "All right, she'll jump back into business." Then he flipped the question, "Why did he come here?" the protagonist finally told her right after the boss fell in the labyrinth. Masari, the one at the top. The highest fairy swore there were no more traps. Then the teleportation actually worked, and that too-good miracle had him immediately on edge as he came. He figured it wasn't a trap, at least not this time. Frederica, stunned, blurted, "So what is it?" And the protagonist shot back, "Someone hit Rosilia and the others with a teleportation spell." The maid nodded and said, "I get it, but teleportation is insanely complex magic, so the enemy is... It was brutally powerful, so did he catch who it was?" Act shot back that he wasn't there at all, because the spell was unleashed from miles away. Frederica burst out in stunned disbelief. "That's impossible. Only a handful of people can teleport, and trying to pull it off past the Eye of Time's limits is way beyond what any human can do." He told her to calm down and said there was only one thing left for Sir. Someone tried to murder his people. The protagonist gripped his fists so tight his knuckles dug into his skin until blood slicked his fingers. The maid strode up to him, slipped her hand into his, and leaned in to whisper what he. He forced himself to hurt his own hand just to cool off and shut that anger down. His voice coming out thick with pure rage. He snapped that some insolent fool had actually dared to step on his subordinates. He'd settle this debt sooner or later, no question about it. After a bit, the protagonist leaned over and demanded to know what the receptionist was even doing. Camilla couldn't contain her excitement, and she fired off a response like she'd just figured everything out, thinking she was throwing everything into chaos, interrupting his day, and when he snapped that he didn't want excuses, the girl swallowed her pride and apologized, clearly shaken and upset. She snapped that from this day on, she wouldn't have to show up anymore, and he ordered her to pack her things and get out right now, fast. Right then, Alistella burst into the room and greeted him with a bright, cheerful, "Good morning." She stared at him, realizing he'd just fired that girl, and before the air even settled, she demanded to know what happened to the woman. Did she mess up the MC? Lucy snapped back that her son had spiked a brutal high fever. She'd gotten the call that very morning from the grandmother. Camilla left the child with her mother, and sometime later, she finally came back. He wheeled around and thanked him with a shy little bow, and he shooed her away like, "Go home already." She probably wouldn't be back for days. She promised to come back only after the child was fully healed. Then she looked him straight in the eye and demanded, "Everything clear?" He nodded, thanked her, and Alistella couldn't help but gush that he was incredibly kind. The protagonist snapped back, making it crystal clear you don't get to mistake her. He just couldn't let her bring any infection into work. So, after lunch back in his office, he leaned in and told her another. Another worker comes back, but this time the man makes it clear he won't have to return from here on out. He looked completely lost, yet he insisted he still wanted to work in the guild. Then the protagonist snapped, "Shut up," because the guildmaster's order had to be obeyed. He told him to bolt out fast, and the subordinate nodded, saying he got it, then thanked him for everything he'd done. All hope was gone for him. Then the man stormed out, and Alistella burst into the room, and before her thoughts even caught up, she blurted, "What's wrong with him?" The MC told her he'd requested a few days off, and the girl immediately wondered, was that really why he got kicked out of the guild? Act realized the worker's mother had fainted back home, so he quietly shifted him to a merchant guild just a short distance from where he lived. The work felt lighter, and the hours stayed short, like it was built for someone who wasn't chained to an adventurer's endless grind. This choice let him finally take real care of his mother, and honestly, it was the most logical move anyone could make. But even so, he insisted he'd stay with the guild because his mom was getting old, and nobody could say when her health would finally give out. Why didn't he realize it'd be smarter to grab a job near home? Home. Then a scream shattered the air as the window lit up, and the worker they'd just fired stood outside. He bowed again to the guildmaster, then promised that once his mother's situation was handled, he'd be grateful to him for the rest of his life. Once his mother was back on her feet, he'd sprint right back, no doubt about it, so the protagonist muttered, "What the heck am I even saying?" The princess flashed a smile and told him, straight to his face, that he genuinely cared about his well-being. Of his subordinates, acting so magnanimous when he chose to. When evening finally rolled in, Rita, of the Mago Technicians Guild, Motley, Star stumbled into Act's office and sobbed, "I can't take this anymore." She couldn't take it anymore, the grind was brutal, and quitting started to feel like the only escape. He calmly shut her down. He wouldn't allow it yet. The girl snapped back that she couldn't take this anymore. It was too much for her. MC snapped that she shouldn't quit yet, because it was still way too early to throw in the towel, and she could handle it. Alistella snapped up to him and asked, "Ready to ditch the guild with me?" He shot back that she didn't, because this woman had ditched their guild right after wiping out everyone else in the competition. And then she was standing there as the guildmaster of the Mago Technicians Guild, while the princess gasped in pure disbelief. She was barely old enough to spell her name, and the guildmaster was already putting her in charge. Rita flashed a grin and teased her about being that young for real, then introduced herself, handed over her name, and said it was great to finally meet her. Stella popped up out of nowhere, introduced herself, and straight up asked if he wanted to quit his job. She nodded, looked him in the eye, and admitted she just couldn't handle people. It all got unbearable. She hit her limit and couldn't take it anymore. The protagonist snapped, "You want me to let you work under me again? I won't, because you don't listen." She shot back that she'd been the guildmaster for 3 years now, and it was time for her to. Rita forced herself to steady her breath, then blurted, "I've been trying for 3 straight years." "Years, just that," she snapped, couldn't take it anymore, and he calmly said, "Since you took over the guild, it's..." Stats kept climbing year after year while the girl shrugged it off as a fluke. The MC snapped back that you don't get real success by luck. It was the proof she had what it takes to lead the guild, and he knew this wasn't even her peak. She had the talent to master Magitech, and the drive to lead people too, and he backed that with his whole word. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye. After a beat of silence, she told him he was right, because if she quit right now, she'd drag him into trouble, and she refused to do that. So she turned around and went back to work. Nancy snapped that if she had time to sit here and chat, she'd better come up with something truly worth it. Rita burst out, and the second she cooked up a fresh design, she'd rush it straight to him, only for him to cut her off. He told her he couldn't wait to see her again because she always turns out amazing work. The girl blushed, completely flattered. Leonard, the guildmaster, praised her, and just like that, Rita finally calmed down and said, "All right, she's got this, she's gonna work." Once she was gone, the protagonist let out the truth. Honestly, there's no way to make sense of any of them. They'd finally found a solid spot to work, so why did everyone keep pushing to return to him, Alice? Della stared at him, deep in thought, then said nothing. Silent, he stared at her, baffled, and demanded what was wrong, only for the princess to shrink back, whispering that everything was fine. She figured he was totally strange, and MC nodded like, "Yeah, you've got that kind of heart, your emotions swing every single second." As darkness rolled in, and night swallowed everything. Alice. Della stumbled to the ground, then lifted her glass of wine in the guild hall. Hall leaned in and gasped, praising how wildly delicious it was. She'd never once tasted wine this perfect. Rosalia flashed a smile and said this booze and all these dishes were made by people whose talent was the only thing the guild could lean on. The guildmaster once saw it, carefully nurtured it, and even she couldn't stop herself from marveling, because that's when she realized what it meant. It meant everyone here was top tier, and then, out of nowhere, Henri snapped her fingers and called out to her, grinning as she admitted she'd gotten it wrong, while Righty insisted the outstanding. She's the guildmaster, and Henri told her the truth when everyone tossed her aside as useless. It was him who stepped in, tracked her down, and saw the talent she was hiding. He threw his talent behind hers and helped her level up fast, because without him, she would have died out on the streets long ago. The princess couldn't hide her shock when she realized everyone here genuinely admired Mr. Act then, out of nowhere at a totally different table, one of the adventurers blurted out a question. Is she really out here saying she loves the guildmaster? The girl blurted the question, totally thrown off. Wait, isn't that right? She just sat there trying to make it click in her head. No way that rumor had to be wrong. Weren't they just showering him with praise moments ago? So how could he possibly be that depraved guildmaster they keep whispering about? Suddenly, Rosalia snapped her voice out loud, calling to her. He told her she was dead wrong because they weren't just going along with it. No, not at all. They were completely obsessed with the guildmaster, and one of the adventurers blurted out. She said it perfectly, and then another girl jumped in. Yeah, because the word like has lost its meaning a long time ago. They just loved him with everything they had. Then they started telling her story after story. Alice. Stella gasped, then realized with a jolt that everything was exactly how she'd feared. She leaned in and asked, Mr. Act is a good man, right? And every single person nodded at once. Then Henri stepped up to her. He asked her straight up if she liked the guildmaster too, and the girl immediately blushed so hard she nearly exploded. What is this even about? While one of the adventurers insisted the man was ridiculously reliable, sharp as a tack, and easy on the eyes. No wonder people fall head over heels for him, Alistella blushed, then quickly shot back that she hadn't meant it that way. Suddenly, Rosalia slammed the table so hard that the whole room seemed to jump, and and she boldly declared that the guildmaster was hers. Her right then, every single piece of advice just slipped out of reach. Disaster hit instantly. Adventurers started snapping at each other, and Alistella stood there, completely thrown off, like she had no idea what to do. He tried to soothe them, but nothing could stop the chaos. Rosalia flushed and admitted she wanted to give herself completely to him because she loved him, plain and simple. The princess barreled up to her, demanded she stop, and thrust water into her hands. Then, without warning, he burst into the hall himself. With a grim face, he demanded what the yelling was about in the middle of the night, and the staff answered in terrified whispers. They were making way too much noise, right? He nodded and said they were so loud they could even be heard in his house behind the building. He snapped awake because of them. These daredevils decided to wreck his sleep, yeah, and all the way in, too, right. Every adventurer snapped with panic, then started blurting apologies one after another. The protagonist ripped the door shut, barked for everyone to head home and hit the sheets, then turned around and started stuffing their stuff into bags. Alistella watched it happen and blurted out, "That's weird as hell." They got scolded to the bone, and somehow they still couldn't stop grinning. Rosalia shot back that it was just the guildmaster's worry if they drank too much. If they kept going, they'd be wrecked tomorrow, so he rushed in to shut them down. She stopped them from getting drunk, and when she asked, his rage didn't flare. He let them off because they'd only woken him up. Rosalia snapped, "No way didn't you see he wasn't even wearing his pajamas?" He doesn't snap at people for no reason when rage finally hits. It's because he genuinely cares about them. Thought this world reeks of guildmasters who treat their members like disposable tools and then toss them out with zero reason. Mr. Act doesn't see people as tools or chess pieces. He treats them like real subordinates. And now she's sure her picture of him as truly kind was never wrong. The princess vouched for him, calling him a good man, and Rosalia backed it up, saying he was the real deal. And tell me, what's the best guildmaster in the whole world doing, and why is the girl mixed in? The girl froze, staring at that smile, and in that second, everything snapped into place. The rumors were never trustworthy. After a while, they finally decided to break out the chess and play in the deceptive tikai. In the protagonist's office, the MC leaned in and shouted. He pushed closer and demanded why she was frozen, so move already, or watch everything fall apart. Alice. Della blurted her next moves out loud, practically buzzing with excitement. Desperately fighting to win right then, Frederick. Erica burst into the room and shoved the evening newspaper into his hands, and fired off, "You guys playing chess?" Then the protagonist. The antagonist thanked her and said he was going to let his guard down for a bit, but then he laughed that his opponent was just too weak, and Alistella's face twisted with pure displeasure. After all, she'd once been the royal court's best player. He replied, "Let her make the first move." Then the maid leaned in and asked about a new member for the hero's party, and MC snapped back that he'd already picked a trusted close-quarters fighter to watch his back. Now he had to find a mage, and the princess didn't hesitate to agree. Act leaned in and said, "Tell her to get ready once Lawrence is gone. Finding another mage like him is going to be nearly impossible. We're leaving." The girl blurted, totally stunned, "Let him wait," because they weren't done yet, and the protagonist stayed quiet. With one lightning move, checkmate was sealed, and Frederica coldly, cleanly declared the master's victory. Honestly, it was thrilling. Then the protagonist started to walk away, insisting Frederica would stay in charge. The girl lowered her head and said her goodbye with a soft, "Aye." A safe trip at last then, after a bit, they finally pushed off. Alistella hit the road, then immediately leaned in and asked, "So where are we headed?" The MC leaned in and ordered her to read the newspaper headline. She read about a dungeon blast and how somehow they pulled off a miracle, saving every single person inside. Everyone involved, he said they were racing to a town near the scene, and that their future allies would be waiting there, but honestly, it left me totally confused. Refused. The girl. Mr. Lawrence's ally leaned in and demanded how he could possibly know that, and the protagonist just told her to read on. Alistella read that no one knows what sparked the explosion, then grinned and said it had to be a spell because some mage was so terrifyingly powerful he wiped out an entire floor inside the dungeon. The MC snapped back, "I've got 0 points. Even if the blast was on purpose, why would you wreck the dungeon along with your own home? And if this was some kind of master plan, what were they really thinking? Wait, why didn't anyone get killed?" She nodded like she already knew the answer, and yeah, it checked out. There were just too few casualties for it to even count as a real attack. Then the protagonist leaned in and said, the blast was almost certainly triggered by... During mating season, fire dragons turned feral and brutally aggressive, so if anyone somehow survived a direct blast of his flame, it meant a terrifyingly powerful mage was hiding among them, shielding the rest. After a few days of getting bounced around in a carriage, they finally rolled into the city of Laverno. MC and Alice Stella stormed into the Adventurers Guild and grilled everyone for answers about that incident. Guildmaster Gary snapped that an entire floor of the dungeon had melted, then he braced for the worst, convinced nobody could have survived. The protagonist pressed him, asking who was the first to report it, and the man shot back, it was Eli. I'm pretty sure he's a total rookie. He's trying his hardest. Yeah, but right now, it's not clicking at all. They say his own companions shove him around, call him useless, and he's warned them again and again. So the MC finally asks, what's going on? But you're telling me he was the first one to sprint over and report it, right? He must know where to find him. And Gary nodded in agreement. Reed shot back that his squad was already posted up at the tavern right now. They thanked him and bolted, and right after that, Alice Della leaned in and asked if he truly believed Eli was a mage on Lawrence's level, he'd tell her, and yeah, he did. The truth hit like a punch. She pointed at him and said they called him useless. And he just had to take it, because she couldn't wrap her head around how someone like that could ever be a great mage. The protagonist snapped that arguing about him without even seeing him with their own eyes was just plain wasted time. They'd track him down and see the truth for themselves. Then, after a while, they finally stumbled into a tavern. Guys were sitting at a table, and that was the setup. The protagonist leaned in and asked, can we talk? Go talk to him. He was the boss of Eli's crew. Hans Grinda stepped up and told him, no, didn't he? No, he'd tossed him out of the team, and the princess just blindsided everyone with it. He froze in shock and blurted out why, and the guy just shrugged, because I'm useless trash. That was it, cold and simple, and he swore he'd only drag them down with his problems. Even on the dungeon trip where the explosion tore everything apart, the loader kept whining that they needed to go home, so the girl snapped, furious, that it was all his fault. Seriously, how could he say that? The protagonist thanked him for the info and shoved a bag of money into his hands, and Hans just grinned like, yeah, I knew you'd be generous. Act nodded, saying, and thanks to you, I saved myself a ton of time. The guy looked lost and demanded, what are you even talking about? And the MC spun around and snapped back that only fools couldn't get it. When the allies finally hit the street, he told Alistalia it was time to move. The princess demanded why he'd shut down her performance, and he snapped back that it was a waste of time because the girl only managed to keep up with him thanks to Eli. Eli, if things kept going like that, it would have spiraled into tragedy. Then they kicked him out for it, and now everyone's laughing at him, which is just brutal. Her whole speech dripped with real rage, and the protagonist just couldn't help asking, what good is her fury going to do? It'll just drain her for no reason, she tried to add, then he cut her off. He cut her off, snapped his gaze to the sky, and warned, it'll rain soon. And even though they'd pick up the search tomorrow, they had to hustle back to the hotel right now. The very next day, the allies pushed on and picked up right where they left off, still marching forward together. Their hunt kept grinding forward, then the rain crashed back down, and they bolted for the hotel. Elastil burst out, and right then, boom, a violent downpour slammed everything to the ground. The protagonist barked at her to keep up, then her allies sprinted right after him. But the protagonist clocked a guy strolling by calm as anything right in the porn. Pouring rain lashed down, and his entire figure screamed with emotion, spilling out like a confession. Despair hit like a brick, then the act cut off cold, and Act stared at the passerby. The princess stared at him, shocked, and demanded to know why he'd stopped. MC snapped that she should head back to the hotel, then bolted to catch up with him. Eli showed up, and the girl blurted out, totally lost, what's happening? What just went down? Then the protagonist caught the guy and demanded, hey, your name's Eli, right? The magician stared back and began to answer. And right there, she stared at him and shot a question, who are you? The dragoness locked eyes with him and said, you're hunting me, aren't you? Then demanded he follow her, no arguments, just come. He grabbed the soaked boy and yanked his cloak over him. We've got to talk right now. Eli just stared, utterly thrown off. He got straight up, asked what he wanted, and Axe shot back that he wasn't going to touch him, then told him to come with him. Eli paused for a heartbeat, then nodded and gave his full agreement. When they finally reached the hotel, the princess had just finished listening. He listened to the protagonist, snatched a towel, and snapped at their ally, furious. How could this happen? He could have at least it was finally explained that it was the same guy, and the reply was blunt. It would take way too long. Alistella started drying Eli's head, which was soaking wet, and the protagonist turned. He spun to the princess and said they'd split the place into separate rooms for men and women, and that Eli should go first and hit that hot shower. The magician blushed and stammered, "You don't need to stress like this." But the MC snapped, "Don't get carried away." He's not trying to let Eli catch a cold and drag trouble into his life, so he pushes him to hurry up, right now. The princess leaned in and whispered to the stunned boy, "Sometimes the smartest move is just to take that kindness, then thank it." He froze right in front of his hotel room door, trembling with hesitation, as if the next step might cost him everything. So the protagonist snapped, "Come on, move already," and told the prince to go in. Princess shoved him into the room, right there, MC. When he stepped into the room, she figured it was the perfect moment for him to sneak off to the bathroom too, then Alistella went in right after and bumped straight. He lunged right into the protagonist's space and demanded to know what she was doing when the girl blurted out in shock. What a disaster, she wanted a child, and he ended up turning out to be a boy, and she blurted, she remarked were, with sheer regret at that indecency, MC stared at her like, "Did you even realize what you just did?" She just tossed the towel onto the floor. He was standing there wrapped in nothing but it, and he ordered her to get dressed only. Only then did the princess fully clock what she'd gotten herself into, and pure embarrassment and shame swallowed her whole.